The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Morning of the earth.
I know.
It's just incredible.
It's just gradually got higher and higher.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's amazing. I like earthquake. I like fault lines as well. There's a bit of mystery to that as well.
Intrigue, yeah. Well, they can cause a lot of problems, but they cause a lot of, I'm assuming that, the fault lines caused our continents originally, didn't they?
Yeah.
The plates all came together and moved apart. And
Similar way to mountain formation as well, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
pushing them up into the
it's
sky.
intriguing stuff.
Yeah, but no, you should definitely go.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I'd like to see that wave in Portugal. That's what I'd like
Nazaré.
to see. Nazaré. That's
That to me
October. Is it October, January time? Would you see?
Yeah, I think it comes through in the winter month. Those giant swells through the winter. But yeah, I mean, to imagine standing on top of that headland. I mean, that's an interesting wave. I think if I did look at the geological sort of seabed in that area, there's a YouTube video that shows what that is, and it's basically a large trench that's carved in it's a strange sort of shape. And then you've got this great big cliff, obviously deep under the sea, and obviously the swell comes in and it hits this ledge and just jacks these waves up. And because of the shape of it, you get those great big peaks that move in different directions. And obviously that one that breaks right, I think it is. Is
that trough a lot deeper than anything
really
else
deep.
in the area?
Really, really deep, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's picking up that swell, and it's like it's like how any wave works, I suppose. And a beach break will work on a ridge of sand, but this is like a sheer cliff face, and the water's hitting it, and
that's coming straight across the Atlantic, and
for miles and miles and miles, just like the Polynesian islands, I suppose, Hawaii. The water's travelled for a huge distance,
and it just hits
picking
a wall.
up impetus, and it hits this wall, and there you go. You get these giant faces, 80-foot faces, incredible, awe-inspiring, really, isn't it? The forces of nature and what they drive man to do. Those guys that go and surf those waves. Jesus.
The English guy that I was talking to you about, I've forgotten his name again. The guy from Cornwall that he broke his back on that wave a few years ago, didn't he?
Right, yeah.
There was a video of him. He got the call, he got the call that the wave was there, and he couldn't guarantee that they could get jet skis.
Right.
And he went out there. They couldn't get jet skis when they were there, so he ended up going into that harbour and swimming a mile out to the back of that wave.
Paddled out the back of it, Jesus.
And then obviously he's not doing any toe-in stuff either.
No,
so he hasn't got
into a wave like that.
And he got one.
Phenomenal.
But I suppose he gets one chance, doesn't he?
Well,
with a wave like that.
He hasn't even got a rescue sled to come and get him out.
Nothing. Mental.
That is really radical.
Yeah.
That stuff is so extreme.
Respect.
So extreme. It's phenomenal. Those guys are at the pinnacle, the absolute pinnacle of their game.
Do they need to be very, very brave as well, or are they just so confident?
I don't know whether it's brave or I don't know what that mentality is that drives them. There's some sort of there's some fault that goes on there somewhere that it's not a death wish, is it? Because people do die on those waves, and have done. But every time you set foot in that ocean in those conditions, there's a chance that you might not come out of it, because they're uncompromising, those waves. The lips, when those lips come over, you're talking about 70-80 foot of water, crashing down, sucking up off the reef underneath, and if you get caught on the inside and you've got a set wave coming in behind you, maybe 2-3 waves, you could be looking at hold downs for a long time. So those guys train to hold their breath for huge volumes of time. They're at the peak of physical fitness. It's people. Just incredible. Yeah, they're true watermen, and to be able to achieve those sort of waves is radical and
I saw
phenomenal.
There was a documentary with was it McNamara,
Garrett McNamara,
McNamara and his sort of crew. There were some other ones on there, and they were going out to do those courses, to do those to learn how to hold their breath for longer underwater.
Yeah, they all have swimming pools, and they're carrying great big stones around, letting the breath go out and trying to stay down as long as possible, simulating being held down by the wave. It's intriguing stuff. It's
love it.
You've got to be right there to be able to do that type of thing. It's
well, you've done it. I can just
I've
look
surfed,
at it.
But I certainly haven't surfed those giant waves. Jesus.
One day, Oz. Anyway,
Maybe.
Oz, we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Oz Holness.
Thank you.
It's good. We're going to be talking about surfing and other things on this podcast by the sounds of it, aren't we?
No doubt.
And a bit of carp fishing as well.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
We met last week, actually, didn't we? On Swan Lake
We did.
Yeah.
I was on a bit of a reminiscent sort of trip, I suppose. Hadn't fished that lake for it must have been somewhere in the region of 15 years. And I was just looking for somewhere to do a small filming trip for summer fishing, really. And it fitted the bill perfectly. So I dropped down there, and you just happened to say, I think it was late that night, wasn't it? I was still up. 11 o'clock, I think. I got a message off you. Any chance I could come down and we'll have a little recce trip and I can have a chat with you? I was like, I'm free tomorrow. So, and the way things panned out was quite bizarre, because the fish that I went on there to catch 15 years ago, this ancient old carp called the Rasta, I caught that morning after our conversation, and just
you mentioned it that night. You said that.
I did, didn't I?
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I think we tempted fate. I think I messaged you the next morning and said, we've talked it on the hook, because I woke up, they were fishing the area, and it was one of those beautiful summer's morning. It's flat calm. It was warm. You could just slip your legs out of the sleeping bag into your trainers, have a nice stretch, get a coffee going, and it was lovely. There was mist curling up off the surface and all this sort of thing. Perfect summer carp fishing dawn, and there was fish about. There's bubblers, a couple showed, and I was rubbing my hands together. I was thinking, I'm going to get one here. I haven't fished this lake for a long time, but I'm on them, and there's no one else here. I was the only one on the lake.
And you were supposed to be filming as well, weren't you?
Yeah, we were going to do a film, but things had to change, and the guy was coming down the following day. So really, I was like, this is a nice little personal trip now, almost. You know what I mean? I was just down there free, just enjoying the moment, really. And I got to take about 7 o'clock. Played it in. It's weedy end of the lake, but I got him in the net. It's a beautiful zip linear, immaculate. They're spawned out. It's midsummer, but he was a beautiful carp. Just exactly like an old Redmire carp, really. Just long, overslung mouth, beautiful line of scales along his flanks. It's a beautiful moment. I was the only one there. Laid him on my mat. I've got big long grass and willow herb, and it's just gorgeous. Took a few self takes, slipped him back. Anyway, I've had a few more coffees, had a couple of liners. Could be another chance, but it was getting a bit later in the morning. It's quite hot, and it was around about 11 o'clock, and I thought I knew you were going to be coming early afternoon. I thought I might have just a half-hour nap, as I've been up since 4 o'clock and didn't get to bed till gone 11. So I just laid back, put my head down on the pillow, and I was away. Anyway, I've pulled into it, and this one properly pulled back. Now, that old Rasta, back in the day, he was renowned. He was like a tiger. He was a powerful carp. He's a male, so he puts up a good ruck. And but anyway, he's 15 years down the line, and he's knocking on the door. He's 50 to 60 years old, this fish. But anyway, still put up a good account of himself, and I suppose he was about a couple of rod lengths out, and it's crystal clear water, weedy. And I saw this fish roll over a big bank of weed. I saw this sort of creamy belly, and the size of it, I knew there weren't really another mirror in there that sort of size. I was like, looks like it's my old mate. And I wound him in and put the net under him, and it was I don't know how to describe it really. It was strange.
A meeting of old friends.
It was like a meeting of old friends. He's ancient, and he just looks ancient. I mean, he's got these great big eyes, like the size of golf balls almost, out the side of his big wide head, like a Labrador, and wide back, and his body sort of withers away to the tail like a tadpole almost, like they do when they get old.
Yeah.
And he's spawned out. So I've got the mat sorted out and what have you, and I've set myself take stuff up and what have you, and I was just like, it's a strange feeling when you meet a really old fish, one that you've caught, and I didn't necessarily really want to catch him, but you've got to honour their presence.
Of course.
And something old Regan gave me a proper bollocking about a few years ago when I was on Conningbrook, and I'd caught the friendly mirror for the second or third time, and Pete was with me, and I was going to just unhook it in the net and put it back, and Pete said to me, "No," he said, that's wrong, Oz. He said, you've caught it. He said, you've got to do it justice, and he's right in a way, and rather than just turf it out of the net or whatever, I treated it as you should do. And I was proud and pleased with my capture. So I've always felt that. I don't like repeats, but in carp fishing, if you fish a lake for certain fish and you want to go back and catch other ones, sometimes it can happen, can't it? It's just part of the course. But
well, you've dragged it out the water. You've put it through. It's had to
absolutely.
go through the whole.
Absolutely.
And then just to think, well, think about the fish.
100%. Yeah, exactly right. So I had there he was, the old rasser, and it was lovely actually.
Yeah.
There on my own, had my little moment, slipped him back, and
ideally you would have liked it on camera, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it would have been good, but that's the nature of things these days. It's like, what did they say when first started this? Never work with children or animals. And when you're working with nature, things can happen at the most inopportune moments. And with this filming, we'll probably talk about that later. It's an incredibly difficult process, and nothing is set in stone. You can go days without, with the wrong weather, or the wrong situation, too much pressure on the lake, or lots of bait gone in at the weekend or whatever. Or you can turn up at the most perfect opportune moments when everything is in alignment, and you get a film as easy as that.
Yeah, passion for angling. We were talking about Chris Yates, weren't we? And apparently he found it frustrating, didn't he? Because it was always waiting for the right weather to look nice on film, but not necessarily the best.
The best for fishing.
And it takes so much longer.
Probably it's best to speak about it later in the as we go through. But the filming side of things is intriguing. It intrigued me when it all sort of came about, my change of sort of career and the various things that I've done. But it is bloody difficult. There is so much that goes into it that I just wouldn't have expected. And to spend 2 or 3 days on the bank, as an outsider, you'd think, well, you've seen the product, the final product of a film. You think it all flows pretty well. It's all pretty straightforward and simple. But to get to that end product, it takes hours and hours of messing about at differing angles, repeated tasks, so that you get everything right. And as Chris was saying, you're often waiting for the little breaks in the weather to get the right shots. You're obviously relying on the carp to be in a feeding mood, being in the right swim. You can't always pick and choose. We haven't got the luxury of having lakes exclusive and things like that all the time. So there's so much that goes into it. Those film crews, the guys that do for these companies, is just phenomenal. The work rate is immense.
It's high. But then, so we met for the first time on the bank last week, and actually seeing your fishing approach, but it was everything you would expect Oz's fishing approach to be. It's like some sort of covert kind of operation somewhere, and it's quite minimal, isn't it? And well, you went to make me a drink, and you only had one cup. It was what was that, to keep weight down and stuff? But you
COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, that's fair enough, Oz.
Yeah.
But I mean, but no, you don't necessarily seem like the sort of person that would have naturally wanted to go for that, filming in the first place because of the type of angler that you are.
No, it's not. It's not something that maybe my style of angling suits necessarily. But with circumstances the way they are, I saw an opportunity that the filming's really sort of making more inroads into the carp angling scene than maybe literature and stuff like that. And obviously I'd spent a fair bit of time writing in the past for magazines and my own personal stuff. Obviously I did a book.
Were you always kind of happy and felt comfortable doing that sort of thing right from the start? Or was it after catching the British record and stuff?
What, the writing and stuff like that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't really ever. I had no aspiration as to have any real dealings with the angling industry as such, or anything that surrounded it. I was quite happy, just plodding on along on my own, doing my own thing, fishing for myself, with my friends. And, I think circumstances can spiral away from you quite quickly for various reasons. But no, I mean, obviously I was approached after catching two-tone. I was approached by a number of publications to do some work for them. I did an interview for Korda, I believe. Did some stuff for a number of the magazines, like interview style things. And I think,
we put a picture of two-tone up there.
Got to put that one up.
An early one up there. Yeah.
Yeah, mega old carp.
But that got the ball rolling then, didn't it, really, with that
I'd
sort of thing?
I'd always done stuff purely and utterly for myself, but, I think when you get a capture like that...
That's a really nice picture of two-tone.
He wasn't the prettiest of old carp.
No, he was quite an ugly carp.
He was an absolute giant.
But quite
so
crusty
impressive.
Looking there.
Yeah. That's like mid-August. The lake that year it was crystal clear, really, really weedy. There hadn't been an algal bloom on there that year. So yeah, he was in good condition. The water quality was exceptional. The food in the lake was like maxed out. There's like millions of snails, crustaceans. It was peaking. I'd say the fishery was probably at its peak that year.
But that led you in a direction that you...
It did. It made a lot of... That capture, I think, it changed my outlook to a degree. It gave me a bit of a stepping stone in various directions that maybe I wouldn't have taken unless I'd had that publicity from that capture. But for a long time I'd always been interested in carp angling literature. I've always read books. I've had a great sort of love affair with all sorts of angling. I love my roach fishing, I love pike fishing, but carp fishing was something that was so dear to me. And my old granddad, God rest his soul, he gave me, when he died, my nan gave me his copy of Confessions of a Carp Fisher.
Oh, right.
I was quite young then, so I didn't read it for a number of years. I sort of flicked through. I thought, well, there's no pictures in there. I'll put that down. And that's it, fishing with my old granddad. I was about, look at that, 70s. Got the old bucket hat on there.
He's got the old suit on there as well.
Yeah, my granddad,
he liked always dressing smart, did he?
Granddad always wore a sports jacket,
shirt
and tie. Always had a pen in his pocket, a little notebook.
Was he a good angler?
He was a great angler. Yeah. He was a countryman, a proper countryman. Grew up in the villages around Kent. such a great role model for me as a young man, or a youngster. Obviously introduced me to fishing. My dad always worked really hard, not really that interested, not a fisherman. So it was my granddad really that took me from about the age of 4. They lived in a little house near the River Stour in Canterbury. So when I was young, he used to walk me down the track. I'd be like, Grandad, can we go and have a look at the fish? And he'd say, come on then. And we'd walk down the local river, and there was a mill at the end of the river, Dalgetter's Mill, and you had like a boardwalk around it with the water rushing underneath. And the perch would always be under the stagings. So I was fascinated. And he'd have a little fish, catch a few and what have you. And I remember one day we were walking along, and there were some canoe stagings, and I was desperate. Where are the perch? And I remember just toppling off the staging into the river. I was about 4, and Grandad sort of walked up and just, casually dragged me out, took me back home, and my mum went absolutely spare. Why, you should have been looking after him, and he was all right. He's looking at the fish under the staging and all this sort of thing. Just it was a man thing, wasn't it? He's all right. The boy's all right. But I was transfixed. And I remember him getting this old cane rod. It was probably Greenheart or something like that, with a little old reel. And I must have been about maybe 5. And he set it up with a little float. And we went down to that mill. And he said, right, you're going to catch one now. And I remember just plopping the float in by the staging. And what the perch are like. They're voracious. And I caught my first perch. And I sent Grandad back home to get a bucket. To come back, I transferred it from the net to the bucket, and then we carried it back home to show my nan. To show my nan.
You need evidence.
And then and then we walked it back to the river and released it. It's such a vivid memory.
It brings back my own memories as well. It's exactly we all have a very similar experience, don't we? To that?
Yeah, we do. I think loads of anglers very, very similar.
Yeah, especially like I say, if you start at a young age, I can remember being underneath the bypass and catching gudgeon. I can remember the first day. They just stay in your mind, don't they?
Yeah, and that's the magic of
it's
of
the
angling,
magic of
isn't
fishing.
It? Absolutely.
Oz, we're at that part of the show as well where have you got a nice gift for us?
I have bought a couple.
Did that sound a bit cheeky?
It's your favourite part, this, isn't
well,
it?
it's always nice, isn't it?
I was terrified I was going to forget, because as we spoke earlier, I've got a great long-term memory.
Oh, we wouldn't have been able to do this without...
My short-term memory isn't that great, but so I bought a couple of bits in. So as we've just been talking about the old Rasta, and you made a lovely long journey to meet me down at Swan.
It was nice. I've never fished in Kent before.
Yeah.
And to go down there and see some of the lakes.
Yeah, right in the Stour Valley. So I bought you one of the proof pages from the book, from the chapter The Swan, with a picture of the Rasta.
And that's from the Force of Nature, your book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's from the book. So
we should try and get that blown up or something, Tove.
So just hold it up next to you, mate. So
there we go.
Yeah, that was one of the proof pages that was sent through to me that I had to go through with a fine tooth comb to make sure everything was good. So I thought there's a little memento of our first meeting.
And that was a few years back, that one.
Yeah, that was quite a number of years back. So
thanks for that, Oz.
The other gift I've bought you is something that, again, it was something that was gifted to me one day when I was fishing Burghfield Lake by a guy called Brummy Bracey. And I turned up. I've been fishing the lake a number of years, and I'd befriended this guy. He's a really cool guy. Helped me out a lot, and a great angler. Anyway, one day I've turned up to Burghfield. Now, anyone that knows Burghfield knows it's got a boat club on it, speedboats, and they tear up and down throughout the summer months on a regular basis, daily generally. So when the weed comes up in the summer and hits the surface, these boats are tearing up and down, and they carve this weed up, and you get the weedbergs, the dreaded weedbergs.
Terrible things, aren't they?
Yeah, size of tennis courts, drifting around the lake on the prevailing winds, with nothing to tether them down. And I'd had this area sort of baited and going, been catching quite a few fish off of it and what have you. And I was in the fire service at the time, so I'd finished my night duties. Couldn't wait to get to the lake. Drove down the motorways, like, can't wait to get to Burghfield. Pretty much knew where I wanted to go as long as no one was there. Anyway, I've pushed my gear down. There's my swims, free. Yes, perfect conditions for it, apart from the fact that there was probably 60 odd yards of weed covering the front of the swim, like just shocker. And my heart sank, and I just thought, oh no, what am I going to do? You could never have landed a fish for it. You couldn't fish effectively. You couldn't really get to the spots. And I just thought, oh, God almighty, this is going to be hell. Anyway, my old mate Brummies turned up, and he went, what's going on? I said, well, I've got this situation. I haven't got my main weed rake. Left it at another lake down in Kent. He was like, I'm just off to the shop. He said, I'll shoot in the tackle shop for you. Anyway, he came back and he bought me this. So it's an old sea grappling lead.
Yeah.
And we put a cable tie around it. And I set to work. And I spent the whole of the afternoon and evening raking these channels.
Just hold it up a little bit, Oz. Can you see that too?
Yeah, hold it up. Yeah, perfect.
Raking the channels in the weed with this.
Oh, I like what you've done there.
This old lead.
Yeah.
And I was sweaty. It was about 20. It was high summer. It was about this time of year. I think it was end of July. And I was bitten by all the midges and the mozzies and sweating. I'd built this massive mountain of weed up, but I've got these two lovely channels now going out. And
it's surprising what you can clear with that, isn't it?
Yeah, I had like £50 braid, and I was basically just casting it to the back of the weed, tightening into it, and I'd literally just walk back. I wouldn't bend the rod. I mean, I'd have ended up blowing my rod up. I was just literally walking back and pulling in great big swathes of this stuff, and then wading in, mounding it out. And anyway, the next morning, at first light, I've had a take, and I caught one of the old original stock Leany mirrors from Burghfield, fish called 3 up 5 down. Now, I'd caught the bulk of the other ones up to this point, and he was pretty much the last one left that I really wanted to catch, bar the common. And so when he came that next morning, after that,
there he is.
There he is. Look, yeah, proper crusty old mirror.
He looks like an old one. He's not like some of those newer Burghfield mirrors, is he?
No, he was from the, I believe, the 1950s stocking, 52, 50, whatever it was. History, he was ancient. Like a big, thick crust of jelly across the top of his head. You know, like I remember holding him thinking, God, you know, it's like you've got a massive slice of history here, and you feel
like you've got some serious responsibility.
Serious responsibility with a carp like that. Yeah, 100%.
Is he still around now?
He's gone now. I actually buried him, as it goes. It was following, might have been the spring following. A friend of mine who lives on the lake. Basically, we'd seen a carcass out in the lake, quite a long way out. I had my binoculars, but I couldn't work out what it was. It looked big, and obviously I wanted to make sure, identify the carp, and obviously get it out as well. So we went and got a canoe from his garden, life jackets, paddled out there, and as we got nearer and near, I could see it wasn't the common, but I could see it was a mirror. And it was that one. Which was a great shame. So, I mean, we paddled back to the bank. I went and got a great big old sack, carp sack that, you know, I bought one of these monster sized ones in case I ever caught the common, needed to, and I picked up some big bricks from the old area where, you know, behind where I was fishing. It's all like sort of backfill. And we went out there and I put her in this carp sack with some big rocks, and we paddled to a really like jungly, islandy area. I won't say where it was, but no one could cast there, or the boats couldn't get near there. And I found this big deep hole and just sunk her back into the lake. Nice. So I gave her a proper, you know, like a proper burial sort of thing back into the lake. And Yeah, like I've said before, it's such a grand old carp, that one, and it deserved that sort of
of course.
respect.
Did it get caught very often?
It used to get caught, quite a few. Get caught 2 or 3 times a year. I know like someone had it the autumn. That capture was July, and it did get caught in the autumn following that. So a lot of people, that was a special fish for a lot of people. I think it sort of, once that cuttail had gone, which was the real big leany that was in there, I think that was the carp that really sort of epitomised Burghfield for a lot of people, other than the common, that 3 up 5 down, because he's so distinctive, the scale pattern, and that ancient leany look, and the age of a fish like that, characteristics, it gives them something really special, doesn't it?
Still find it phenomenal that carp can just spend that much time in one place.
Incredible.
It's just unbelievable.
Absolutely incredible. You imagine they just know everything. They're so in tune in their home. But
it was this that actually caught you. It really then.
So
if it wasn't for that.
So my good friend Paul shooting to the tackle shot, getting me this little sea lead, and when I caught the fish in the morning, I just I put a 3 and a 5 with an arrow up and an arrow down into the lead, and that stayed in my tackle bag sort of pretty much ever since. But I thought it'd be a suitable time to
that's great. Thanks
gift it away to somebody else. It's got a bit of story behind it.
It has got a story. Yeah, we just have to add it to the
the collection.
That'll look nice on the front there, mate.
Right on the front, Tone.
A marvellous collection.
There you
Some
go.
good stuff there. Look, old Pete Regan left his teeth behind.
You're waiting to say that.
He's had me so many times.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
You've got to get your own back sometimes. I know he's been on the show, so
that thing keeps. Well, the batteries have run out now.
Yeah, sorry, Pete. The batteries are dead. Finally.
What a pain in the arse that thing's been. You couldn't walk past it, obviously.
Yeah.
All the time. And every time you hear it, you just see Regan's
I was going to say, I must say, the batteries have died. Not because we've been using it, just from walking past it.
Every time it croaks, you can imagine Regan's just laughing at you.
He's always laughing at you. I've known him for a good number of years now. I met him on Conningbrook. And I hit it off with him straight away. He's got that... The fire brigade, I was in the fire service a long time. You've got a strange sense of humour. There's a very warped...
gallows sense of humour.
Yeah, that type of thing. And Pete he can be scythingly wicked. And if you're remotely timid or,
he's on you.
He's ruthless. And... but I liked that, and I thought he was great. And it's very rare that I ever get one over on him. And I thought I did once upon a time. I sent him I had an old army coat, and I'd been training hard for this particular event, and I'd lost quite a bit of weight.
Was this the rat race you were talking
The rat race.
I've read that. Yeah, fair play.
The rat race. That was savage.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about that. But. And anyway, I thought, I could do Pete over here. So I've parcelled this coat up and wrote a note in there saying something like, this doesn't really fit me anymore, but I thought it might be suitable for you, Pete. Hope you get some good use out of it. Like that. Sent it through the post to him. Anyway, like he would, he said, bloody lovely coat. That I'll get great use. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Anyway, a couple of years down the line, I've got this parcel. What the hell's this? I haven't ordered anything. I've ripped it open. There's a note from Pete and this bloody coat. He went, I've just been talking to Dean. He saw you at one of the shows. He reckons you put on a couple of pounds. He said, so I thought you might get use out of this coat. He said, as I don't need it anymore. So there you go. He sent it back to me. He's a rum boy. He doesn't miss a trick.
He doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't miss a trick. So he does make me chuckle. He's a great
There's
character.
been a lot of love for him, actually, since our podcast.
I should hope so. He's one of the great characters in carp fishing, without a doubt. And he's got, so much history, and so much personality. It's hard not to glean something from a podcast like that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's very easy for me. I just sit here and let him talk, and Damo's there just to make sure that he properly behaves himself.
Yeah, I know.
We were going to do it with just the two of us, and it was like,
oh mate, no.
It was too much risk, wasn't it?
It was very
A
riskful.
huge risk, and he would have, he would have played up beyond all comprehension, I'd imagine.
But
He
he's
doesn't
one of
miss a
these
trick
guys,
like
though,
that.
isn't he? I think once he gets to know you, when he warms to you, and he's a great character.
He's absolutely marvellous.
Glad he came on here.
Yeah, no, I in fact, I think I messaged your Instagram page just to say you've got to get Pete on. And funnily enough, it was a few weeks or months later, and I found out that he was.
Did he not tell you then that he was going to do this?
He did before, but
was he a bit nervous about doing this?
I don't think so. No, he's got a lot of bravado, Pete. Though.
He'd
Never tell you, even if he was
terrified.
If he was shitting himself, he'd never even mention it. He's a man's man, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? He's worked on those ships and with those crews. They're proper.
You've got to be tough.
You've
got to be tough to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing I noticed with you, you're a fit guy and you're a determined guy, Oz, and you broke your leg, didn't you, earlier in the year fishing?
yeah.
And
yeah.
How on earth did that happen?
Well, I mean, I'm nearly 50. I'm a year off 50. You don't go through life leading the sort of life that I've led without injuries and incidents, I suppose. But fishing wise, I've been pretty lucky up until just between Christmas and New Year last year. So, you want to hear the story behind this?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Explain the
Yeah,
I do.
Well, normally at Christmas, I generally have a break from the fishing. So, family time, all that sort of thing. And, rightly so. And I quite enjoy it, to be fair. And normally after Christmas, I generally get out on the rivers, do a bit of roach fishing, that type of thing, or a bit of pike fishing. And this particular year, I finished my carp fishing mid-December-ish, something like that. I thought, right, I'm going to have a nice lead up to Christmas, do some shopping, family time, visit people I don't normally see. So Christmas came and went, and you get that, I don't know, I always call it a bit of a dead period between sort of Boxing Day and New Year's Eve, where you might have plans. It might be, we're going to go and do a bit of shopping, we're going to go and do a bit of this. And I tend to start getting a bit twitchy. I'm like, I need some time outdoors. And we've been out visiting friends. So it's late afternoon, and we were driving back, and it was mild. That was the catalyst. I remember looking at the temperature gauge in the car, and I think it was like 13 degrees, something like that, and it was cloudy, and I was like, Jesus, this is perfect conditions. And I'm sort of thinking on the way, and I've gone quiet. And when I go quiet, my missus was like,
oh dear,
what are you thinking? Yeah, what's going on? I was just thinking maybe it would be quite nice to get out and go and do a night's fishing. She's like, why don't you go when you get back? Put the foot down on the accelerator, and we're home, and I'm like rushed into the garage, throwing the kit in the van and what have you. I couldn't wait to get to the lake. I just thought, I just want a night out under the brolly, watching the lake, a few cups of coffee, maybe a Baileys coffee, something like that, nice. And just some chill out time. So blattered my way to the lake, through the gate, signed in, all that sort of malarkey. And I'd been fishing a local lake, Chilham Mill. Never really fished it, and it's an old historic lake in the valley. Like they've done loads of filming on there in the past. I mean, Damo's been on there with
done well, didn't he?
Yeah, in the winter and all that. And I'd never really fished it. So November, I bought a winter ticket. November into December, been doing all right, going down there a couple of times a week. I think I'd had about 12 or 14 fish to that point, and I just got them sort of located in this narrow mill end, and there was a big group of fish there, and I'd caught my last fish from that zone, so I wanted to go back there. Went up there, no one in the swim, perfect, legged it back to the van, got my kit, and by this point I'm rushing. So I've got kit strewn all over the top of the bank, I've got 3 rods set up, and I've got spots. So I've clipped 2 of these rods up, gone down into the swim, which is a sort of dugout swim. So you go down some steps into the swim, flick the rods out, badonk, that's on the spot, badonk. A few pouches of bait, that's just simple fishing really. I've got 1 rod left. I've got my little dog down in the swim. He's sitting there watching, waiting to get up on the bed chair like he does and all this sort of thing. And it's dusk. So I've got this last rod, got him wrapped up. I've stepped down into the swim, and for whatever reason, there was a soft area. It's got the swim's covered in this bark stuff. And there was a bit of a hole and a soft area. And my foot has gone down into this soft, spongy, it's like treading onto a pillow really. And with the momentum of me moving forward down these steps, my ankle's turned over. Now I've already broken that ankle when I was in the fire service.
That was another story.
That's another story. But this time, as it's gone over, I've heard this crack, like a gunshot almost. And I've gone over, I've thrown the rod into the bush, and I'm screaming.
Yeah, I bet.
And I instantly sort of knew that I'd broken my leg. You know, I've seen people with broken legs. I've seen the injuries happen. I've heard the mechanism of injury was perfect for it. You know, I was trained in trauma care in the fire, so I sort of knew what had happened. So, pretty obvious.
So what would you do in that situation? If you realised you'd broken your leg, you would probably call an ambulance or something, wouldn't you?
Yeah, panic first for a while.
Yeah, what am I going to do here?
Yeah, and then, probably.
Oz, you do the same sort of thing, call an ambulance? Or
No. By now it was raining, and I thought, right, what am I going to do? So I sort of reached behind me, found my bed chair, dragged it down into the swim, set that up, sat on there, and I thought, I better have a look at this. So I've gradually peeled my boot off and my sock and had a look, and it's swelling and what have you. And I thought, well, at least it's not an open fracture. At least the bone hadn't come out of the skin and what have you. And had a good feel about it. Thought, yeah, he's definitely broken. So I got a bank stick out of my rod holdall. And I've got one of these multi-scarf things, and I've like wound that round my leg, sort of twisted it off, sort of half hitched it off, stuck a sock through it and a bivvy peg. So I've made like a sort of makeshift splint and put my sock back on, trousers back down.
You're like Rambo.
Is that what that picture is then?
Yeah, that's my makeshift splint there. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a jag bank stick down one side. It's tied off, hitched off with my sock.
Well, you say it like it's a real normal thing to do.
Everyday
it's
life.
It's definitely not normal.
Wow.
I can't profess to be in that normal, but yeah, I just thought I could cause a lot of fuss and aggro here trying to get off the lake in the dark. But I thought I was on my own, and then I remembered seeing a couple of names in the signing in book. So, and this is the amazing thing about social media, I suppose. I've scrolled through and I found one of these guys, and I've messaged him on social media, Facebook or whatever it is, and he's over the other side of the lake, right at the other end of the lake, and he's like, "What's up?" And I told him what. He's like, "Oh my God, what do you want me to do?" Blah blah blah. Proper top fella, Keith Pickett his name is, and there was another chap there as well. And I said, look, you know, if it's at all possible in the morning, would you better come round, help me pack my gear up, and maybe bring my van up to the back of the swim? And he's like, whatever, do you need anything? Blah blah blah. So I should be okay. And he said, well, here's my number if you need me. So anyway, I sort of settled myself down for the night. I brought my rucksack.
So you're still completely focused on your fishing then?
Yeah, I've got 2 rods out. I've got 2 rods out in the zone. I'm like rubbing my hands together thinking this
Even though you've got a broken leg.
Game on. I've got 1 rod in the bush. And this is where things could have got a little bit tasty, because I was still sat up. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and a good fish has showed about maybe 2 rod lengths out off the side of the swim. And I thought, well, I haven't got a rod there, but I've got a rod in the bush. So I've managed to sort of crawl myself over, grab this rod out of the bush, come back, made up a little PVA bag, crept to the front of the swim, flicked it out, flicked a few little lumps of paste around it and what have you, put a bank stick in. I've got 3 rods out now, thinking I've got three chances here.
3 chances and a broken leg.
And then I started thinking it might be a bit mad because how are you going to photograph? You know, it could all get a bit awkward.
You'd be lying on your belly or something, wouldn't you? Or...
Yeah. I just thought, you know, I was comfortable-ish. I knew it would be better to wait till daylight, and if I felt that there was being a more serious problem, I would have, you know, changed the goalposts as such.
Is that completely typical of you? I mean, what does it take to stop you? I mean, clearly that's not
kidney
enough.
stones.
Yeah, oh, that'd be painful.
Yeah,
you've had those.
Yeah.
That's,
that.
But generally, you're a deter. I mean, it comes across in your angling, doesn't it?
I won't generally let anything come between me and what I want to achieve. If it's at all possible, I'll move heaven and earth to make something happen. I think that's the only way to.
How do you prepare for campaigns and stuff? I mean, choosing waters. I mean, you had a period in Reading fishing and stuff. What do you look for first of all?
So, in my own personal angling now, I suppose the best way it's got to have soul. I don't know whether that means anything to anyone, but the lake's got to have a soul to it. It's got to have an atmosphere and an essence to it that makes me really want to be there. And obviously the fish, there's got to be something about those carp that will make me get up at 1-2 o'clock in the morning and travel 2, 3, 4 hours to the lake to fish through really adverse weather conditions, to be away from my family, my wife, you know, who puts up with a lot from me with all the things that I get up to and do. And you know, those carp have got to have either history or have the looks about them that gives me that sort of desire. So
are you looking for long-term stays on lakes, or do you just want to get on and off of them as quickly as possible? No,
that's the last thing I want. The way I've sort of gone through my life for the last 20, 30 years, I would say everything that I do, I want a story. I want to be able to look back on it and go, Christ, that was fucking mega. That was so memorable. That was so enjoyable. And, you know, if it's too straightforward, if it's too easy, I don't find the stimulus for me isn't there. I suppose essentially when I came into carp fishing was difficult. It was hard. You know, it was meant to be. I think carp fishing was meant to be a challenge, meant to be difficult. And I've always sort of taken that ethos right through my own personal angling. Although, obviously, I totally get that every now and again it's nice to go to a water that's got a decent stock in it where you can get a few bites. And, you know, those type of waters are there to cater for the vast majority of carp anglers these days, I think, that have got very limited time. They want to catch when they go. That's the whole point of it, I suppose. And yeah, fortunately, there's so many waters now available that probably they weren't really there 30 years ago.
No,
you know, they weren't really there. So I didn't really know or understand that. That's come subsequently. The more commercial waters, let's say, for instance, and you know, thank God they are there, because there's so many carp anglers these days that all want the same thing. Now we have that diversity of venue that caters for everybody, which is brilliant.
But you come from an era where carp fishing felt a certain way, and it's just trying to hold on to that, isn't it? And
yeah, I don't want to romance about it too much, I suppose, because it's easy to do that, isn't it? And I find it very easy to do that. But I know things have moved on, but there's still so many places out there that exude an element of magic, and they are still fairly low stock, and they have still got old carp residing in them that don't last forever. So I choose to spend my time fishing for the fish that I know aren't necessarily going to be around for so long, or that instill a particular feeling inside me that stimulate that passion to make me want to chase that dream. And fish like, let's say for instance the Burghfield Common was exactly that.
The ultimate challenge, really.
For me, it was at the time, and mainly because I suppose I didn't know anyone that had been up there and chased that fish, or pursued it. So,
but you've got a feeling of kind of confidence when you know that you're turning up to a water and all of your focus is geared towards that.
Yeah.
And nothing else gets in your way too much.
No, everything that I do, once I've set my mind to something, everything that I do will be channeled into that direction, other than, my family and work life. That has to take precedence over everything, because you can't go fishing unless you're earning your money, and you want to go fishing with the blessing of your partner or your wife. So
you said you had a wake up call 20 odd years ago.
Yeah.
When fishing was everything to you. Yeah. And then something happened that made you reevaluate everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been with my wife for a long time, so she understands my fishing. She understands what lengths I'll go to achieve what I set out to do. Friends and other family don't always have that same insight, because it doesn't quite work like that. So, I suppose really fishing was such a big part of my life. So, on days off, everything would revolve around either fishing trips or going to the lake, baiting up, making bait, because we made our own bait back in those days. So time consuming. Everything was revolved around that. And I joined the fire service by that point, and that gave me the time to be able to go fishing more than I had ever been able to before, because we worked a 48-hour shift. So it's 4 days, 2 nights, 2 days, and 4 days off. So I don't know. I think carp fishermen can be fairly selfish on a whole. As a general rule, we can tend to be quite selfish people in the respect of we want to do it to the max. I don't know any carp fisherman that doesn't go home and then not want to be back at the lake. Do you know what I mean? As soon as you come away, you think, where are they? What are they doing? Are they, so it's in your head. So I don't know. I just felt like I was probably erring on the side of obsessive, and I was using a lot of my time to focus my attentions on my angling and my fulfilling those dreams that I had of being out fishing a lot and what have you. And I was doing some work. I had a really good friend, like such a spirited guy, like a proper geezer of a fella. He'd come from public school background, but was nothing like that. His dad had a massive building firm. He was doing his own little sideline project sort of thing, and he needed someone to help him out. It was like renovating small houses and what have you. And I was like, do you know what? I'd love to help you out. I could give you a few days here and there and what have you. So a friendship turned into like a bit of a partnership in a way. I was working for him, and you know what it's like when you spend a lot of time. We were solid, absolutely tight. And yeah, he was one of those guys that if you were a girl and you took him round to your mum's, she'd be like, oh, I'll make you Sunday dinner. Oh, you've got to marry him. He's so wonderful. He could charm the birds out of the trees. he was a great guy, and we had the best of times. You know, such a laugh and what have you, and. You know, he was similar to me. He loved the old adrenaline rush. He had big, you know, he's into motorbikes. So he had these big 1000cc motorbikes, Ducati and whatever. I can't remember what else he had, but he was really into all that sort of thing. And I suppose my love of carp angling, he didn't get. He's like, what, you sit around on the bank all the time? You know, some people just can't get it. They don't see the appeal. And I'd booked, back in those days, we had a closed season. So I'd booked a week off work and we'd done our work parties and I had my swim. We'd had a draw for swims and 2 or 3 weeks in advance, you're going pre-bait. So I'd been down there firing the boilies out and what have you and looking forward to it. And he'd decided to have this party, and it happened to fall on the 15th, and we were down there, plotted up on the 15th, ready for midnight, and he was like, "Are you coming to my party?" I was like, "No, I can't. I'm fishing. I've got a week. No, you don't want to do. Just come for the party. You can go. You've got a week to go fishing." He just didn't get what it was all about, and I knew I wanted to go to the party, but I knew my fishing it meant so much to me as well. So I went fishing, and morning of the 16th dawned and what have you. I think I'd caught a couple of fish, and I was sitting in my bivvy, and I heard some walking coming up the track. I've looked round, it's my missus. It's like, that's weird. Why on earth is she turning up down here? I thought maybe she's bought me breakfast, but I could just tell something was wrong, and you know, she said, "Oh, I've got some really bad news. You better sit down." I was like, "Jesus, no, what's going on?" And my really good friend, he'd gone out the following morning. Someone that he'd met at the party who was also into bikes, and they'd gone on a long trip. And on the way back, he'd taken a corner maybe too fast or whatever, come off the bike, hit the central reservation, and you know that was it. Finished. He was dead. You know, mid-20s, full of life, and that absolutely crucified me. I can't even tell you how that made me feel at that time. It sort of, you know, looking back on it, I know with maturity and whatever, it was one of those moments that made you realise how fragile life and existence is, and how much you have to achieve and do and take stock of everything that's around you and all the people that are around you and go, where the fuck is the balance? Where do you draw the lines? Where do you make the decisions and what have you of what to do? And it was I mean, you know, I've been in the fire service 5-6. I'd seen a lot of shit over that brief period of time, but this hit me like a sledgehammer, and I didn't quite know what to do with myself. So I thought, right, take a step back from everything and just have an assessment of where your priorities lie and what have you. And I just thought, you know what, you've really got to make the most of every single day, do exactly the right things with the right people for as long as you possibly can, and that made me realise that there were other things that I needed to do. That the world was a big place. I had a lot of good people around me, had some great colleagues at work, my family, my wife, and I had other things that I did that I was neglecting. So when I was a young teenager, my auntie moved to Cornwall. So we used to go down there and visit her on holidays. I got into the surfing scene. That progressed gradually and moved on to kite surfing and wakeboarding, stuff like that. So I had other things that I had real interest in that I could do, that included my wife. You know, we could travel, we could go off different countries, we could go around the UK, and she loved her photography. I could go out into the ocean or whatever and spend quality time, even if it's just a day or two, a long weekend or whatever. It didn't have to be my whole life revolving around one thing.
Can you imagine where you would be now if you just carried on that path?
I can't even imagine. I don't know. I really don't know. I certainly wouldn't be the person I am today. And I certainly wouldn't have the outlooks that I have today without... I'd have fished a lot more waters. I would quite possibly be divorced. Maybe. I'd have had a nice album of carp because I missed quite a lot of really significant or a really significant period of carp angling development, which I realised quite quickly when I made that path back into to doing it seriously again.
How long were you out of it for?
So I suppose really I didn't fish for carp properly, I'd say. I did fish for them. I'd go down to local ponds for an afternoon with a floater or a bit of floating crust or something like that. But I'd say probably 5 or 6 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah.
What, you just didn't really feel the urge, or you just...
I just felt so... It's in my blood. It like that never left. But I felt like there were so many more things that I wanted to do before I would put that amount of intensity of effort back into something. Because the type of personality of it, it's like there ain't no half measures.
Don't look like it.
I've got to do everything absolutely maxed out, or I'm not. I don't find it stimulating enough. So
was it like going on a bit of a spiritual journey to just try and find out what you...
It was, and I suppose, through that bit of travelling and the various things, especially the pursuits that I did as well in between times, they're inherently like a spiritual sort of thing. Surfing really is, a little bit anyway. Let's say, for instance, Central America, Costa Rica, their whole ethos revolves around this saying pura vida, the good life. But it's more than that. It's a way of living, and I think
it's a whole lifestyle. That.
Yeah, that's brings back some good memories. That does.
Whereabouts was this picture that we're looking at?
I think that is the coastline of Guanacaste. That's probably the Nosara Peninsula.
Yeah.
That's a decent sized board you got there.
Yeah, that'd be a 10-foot longboard. Beautiful. That Pacific coastline of Costa Rica, you just got some incredible waves there. They're powerful, but they're punchy as well and long, and perfect for that longboard. I've shortboarded in the UK on the really sort of messy beach break stuff.
You're
I'm
into
not very good at it, but I prefer the big old, what they call the logs, the longboarding.
Yeah.
It's a bit more stylish, bit more capable for me on those type of waves. It's just absolutely magical. I
said to you before, I've always had a romance with surfing. I've just never got round to doing it. Actually, the only time I've ever tried surfing was on an artificial wave in Dubai. And there was just me and this female instructor. And that wasn't going to...
Oz, please take him surfing. I'd love to see that.
I think it'd be fine, Oz.
Yeah, but that, I've not been to Hawaii. I'd love to go, but the Hawaiian spirit, the aloha spirit, it is they live by a code, by a certain essence of being, and it's quite all that stuff. I find it intriguing and quite magical. It's like a...
Do you think it is as pure out there as it looks to us?
Where? What? Hawaii? Jesus, I think it's a radical scene. It's been... I think the locals probably, although tourism is a massive part of it, you know, they're a proud nation, aren't they? They're a proud people, you know, seafaring nation, and you know, surfing is part of their culture, and having their beaches and waves mobbed by very poor surfing etiquette and outsiders probably has caused. Well, they even formed a, I can't remember, it was called Dahui, I think it was called. They formed a clan of locals to actually like patrol the beaches, and I think they took over like a lot of the lifeguarding, and you know, they basically ran the waves, you know, in a tight knit way. Yeah, pretty heavy stuff, I think. But yeah, I mean that is the pinnacle. You know, I'm not talking about the touristy beaches, but I certainly would never go to a country like that and take it without the absolute utmost respect. Yeah, you know, I think there's a real code over there. I'm pretty certain that, you know, like there's certain hours of the day when only the older guys can go out surfing. You know, the younger folk won't even go. That's their time, and things like that. You know, it's quite a lifestyle thing. But yeah, I've been many places, Europe.
Is carp fishing always in your mind while you were doing all this stuff then, or could you totally detach from that?
I think, because I fished a lot in between times as well, like I bought a boat, so I had a boat on the local river with a friend. We shared the boat, and you know, throughout the winter time I'd roach fish and pike fish and what have you, and I'd still go fishing. Like I took my nephew carp fishing during that time. It never left at all, and you know, there's one particular moment that really, I think, reignited the fire for me, and that was so I've been doing these water sports. By this time I'd been wakeboarding a lot and kiteboarding a lot. It puts a lot of pressure on your joints and your back and what have you.
I've just got to throw that action shot up for you.
Yeah, that's
you again.
That's the UK. That is, yeah. That's wakeboarding.
Did your wife take that picture?
Yeah.
It's good, isn't
what
she?
A picture, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we went. I've wakeboarded on like jungle rivers and stuff like that out in Sri Lanka, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a lovely, you know, fluid freedom with all those water sports. It's amazing. It's fitness as well.
Oh, so would you ever do anything like snowboarding or anything like that?
I've been snowboarding a couple of times, but I like the water. I like the water element. Yeah. You know, it's just that there's a connection somewhere, and I like the heat. I don't like cold.
Oh yeah, that might put you off a bit then.
But it's a similar thing. Yeah, that board sports thing is.
Yeah.
I mean, I you know, I had a couple of skateboards as well. When I was surfing a lot, I bought one of these long boards. It's a skateboard, but it's like double the length, and they're for cruising and learning your turns and what have you. And I had a spaniel at the time, and I used to put a harness on him, and he would actually tow me. My missus like see me go shooting past the window of the house. Yeah. The old spaniel pulling me along. It was great. But so yeah, all board sports really are something pretty special. But yeah, I injured my knee. Had to have cruciate ligament surgery, and that surgery just happened to be in the hospital about half a mile from Conningbrook Lakes. So I'd been back post-surgery. I'd been back to see the consultant, and he sort of gave me the all clear and what have you. And I thought, right, that's the morning done. What am I going to do? I thought, right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop in and see old Joe at Conningbrook, who lived on the house, and have a cup of tea with him. Lovely old boy. And it would sort of, you know, I hadn't seen him for a number of years, or the lake. So I pulled into Joe's house and parked my van up, knocked on the door. Hello, Ozzy, lovely to see you and all this. And come in, have a cup of tea.
What was his... So he had a house on the lake.
So Joe, basically, there was an old barn on the banks of Conningbrook where it was a quarry. Brett's had finished... Well, actually, they were still digging it at that time. They were still digging the back lake, but there was a barn on the banks. There was a farmhouse and an old barn, and Joe had bought the barn as a derelict building, and he basically renovated it from the floor to the roof and built it up and made this gorgeous barn conversion and lived in it. So he's not an angler. He just lives on the banks of the lake on what we call Joe's Point, with his gorgeous views, gorgeous family, lovely people. And he just used to wander out in the morning with his cup of tea, and whoever was about was his target for a morning chat. He'd like, oh, was he? and he'd come over for a chat, and he'd talk about all things and what have you, and he'd wander back for his breakfast, and he'd invite you in for, come and have some peaches, come and have a bit of toast, whatever. He just liked company. He was a people's person.
And he seemed to be at the heart of everything, didn't it? It seemed
yeah,
to
I missed a lot of that. I was there at the very early days of Conningbrook, when Paul Ford was sort of pioneering it down there, really. He'd discovered that they'd put these fish in there from the mill pool. And I did a little bit, but I think I was probably 18 at the time, fishing for 18 carp in a rich gravel pit. It wasn't really for me. I loved it down there, but I knew carp fishing was something different for me at that point. I didn't really have the minerals as such to want to sit there fishing for virtually nothing all year. People were lucky, you're getting 1 bite a year, 2 bites a year. It was, Paul did well, but most people struggled. So
what year was this when you came back?
That would have been 93, 4-ish to begin with. Then I came back to see Joe. That would have been 2002/3 season.
Oh, so things now, you've got the biggest carp in the country.
Well, yeah. I knew it was big. I'd kept an eye on the growth rate of that two-tone, and I'd seen a number of the captures in the angling press. But I walked out anyway. I had this cup of tea with Joe, and Joe said, "Look, Ozzy, go and have a walk around the lake. It's so different to when you were last here. There's a couple of people fishing." So I've walked past Joe's Point, and there's a fella asleep. So I've walked past him, and I've gone to speak to this other chap. While I was speaking to him, I've seen the guy on Joe's Point jump out from under his brolly, pull into a rod. Jesus, someone's actually had a bite. It's like a revelation. This is amazing. And I'm here. Fantastic. So this is before they cut the channel to the back lake, so you could walk all the way around the perimeter of the old lake. So I said, I'm going to go around and help him. So I've limped off with my old dodgy knee. And I've got round there, and this chap's playing this fish. And I'm all sort of in civvies and what have you. And crystal clear, that lake. I saw the fish roll. And I think he knew what it was anyway. And it's like, fucking hell, that is ridiculous. That vision of that carp just stay with me forever. And I've seen it subsequently, but there's always something about that first sighting of something you're actually going to make a journey towards, and that was it. And this guy was playing it, and anyway, he's gone, mate, get the net. So I've waded out with the net, passed in the net. It's in the weed and what have you numerous times. Eventually, it's gone in the net, and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. I honestly couldn't believe the size of this carp. Now I've never fished abroad. I went once in 1987 to the 20 Canal in Holland. I don't do sort of abroad fishing, so this thing was like a hippo in the net, and this guy was as cool as a cucumber. I was like, mate, that is just enormous, mate. He's like, yeah. Anyway, so we better get Joe out the house and a net to do the witnessing with you and what have you. You want to see it and everything. And so they all came out, and this other guy came round. We got it out and weighed it, and I've got to think now what it was, but pretty sure it was £59 2 ounces, which was a new British record. and the captor was a guy called Mark Toland.
Right, yeah.
Or Cockle, as they call him.
Yeah, right. So you saw the British record actually get caught?
Yeah, before my very eyes. And
Had it done a record previously to that? Well, was it Mary before that?
Yeah, so I think it had. It was just phenomenal. And I remember Mark was on the phone to Jacko and he said, I've got odds with me, blah, blah, blah. And I said to Jacko, God, I can't believe how cool this guy is. He's like, yeah, but he's had Mary 3 or 4 times or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it all sort of made sense. Do you know what I mean? There's me, like, fucking eyes bolting out of my head and what have you.
Do you think if you were living on the other side of the country, would you still wanted to fish for that carp?
I'll tell you something, Simon. If you'd have seen it, I don't know anyone that saw that fish on the bank or in the water that wasn't immediately captivated by its presence. It was ridiculous. It had this great big, both pecks were massive, but one of them was enormous. It's like nearly a foot long. And it was like a barrel with this great big tapering tail root that was still as wide across the back as a 20-pounder. In the water, it just had a captivating presence that couldn't be ignored. And as an angler, any fish you see in the water has got...
How often would you see it?
Not very often. Like I've got some video footage of it, but it's really old and I couldn't get it on my computer.
That's a shame. Really like that tape.
Yeah, that would have been good.
But you didn't see it very often in the edge. It used to spend a lot of its time out in the lake, in the deeper water. It was a bit of an enigma of a carp, We didn't really know whether it was a male or a female.
The big pecks on it just sounds like it's a male, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And did you ever see it spawning and stuff?
No. It used to turn up at spawning situations. Like you'd have, like the spawning would kick off, let's say at 2:00 in the morning, and you'd be there. Everyone would sort of gather up, and they'd be looking. Oh look, there's long common, there's white tips, there's Tom's pet, and you'd sort of start identifying all these recognised. Don't forget there weren't a lot of fish in there,
no.
So you could identify most of them, and the handful of what they call the odd uns, the smaller commons, 20-pounders and what have you, and then all of a sudden, 30, 40 yards out, this fucking Goliath of a thing would come thrashing through the way, slosh back down, and he was on his way in to eat the eggs. You wouldn't see him getting pushed around, or you wouldn't see him getting involved in that spawning. I mean, I was only there for those couple of years, but I was there both spawning periods of the time I was there. And all I saw him do was come in to the reeds. He would sort of be lurking 20, 30 yards out. And then when everything sort of calmed down, you just knew he was in there eating it all.
Do you think he was just he was feeding on naturals a lot? I mean, some people did catch it over bait. It was well known for getting caught on singles, though, wasn't it? But
it was a strange scenario with that fish over time. So I missed a big chunk of it, but obviously I knew a lot of the guys that were fishing there during that period, and I know the history. It's a local pit to me, so I'm pretty on the ball with it all. And a lot of the captures were single hook baits, especially bright ones, out in the pond to shows or whatever. But there were the other captures that proved that there was something different going on as well. Namely, let's say, for instance, Jacko's capture of it with the breadsticks and the casters. Brownie, Ian Brown, his capture, not capture, I think he caught it at least twice on his caster method.
Caster method, yeah.
So he was using the big caster bags with like little rubber casters glued on the back of the hook on a bit of foam. This is the mid to late 90s. He saw the opportunity. He's a very clever angler, very clever guy, Ian. He saw that opportunity with the Cadiz situation, and he made that situation work in his favour with that caster rig and those bags, and he caught that big mirror like that. But that big mirror was very, very rarely ever caught out of the edge as such. So the marginal shelf, the real shallow shelf that ran round a lot of the lake, certainly in the latter years, that fish very rarely ever ventured up onto that or whatever. He was always sort of out in the pond. So a lot of the very, very good edge anglers would catch a specific amount of those carp, but unless they were prepared to change tactics as such, the chances of hooking that old two-tone were quite small. Although there were opportunities, there was a couple of spots around the lake, little clay humps and that were still within almost like underarm of the bank that he would get caught off at certain times of the year, normally around that spawning time.
I know Tom liked fishing in the margins, didn't he? And
Tom, yeah, I met Tom on there a number of times. He was there while I fished it for the 2 years that I was there. Such a talented angler with a great method of catching those carp. But, he was there a good number of years, and that old two-tone never came his way, unfortunately.
No.
So it happened. There were some really, really talented, capable anglers that fish just punished badly, and yet a lot of people caught it in their first couple of bites.
That was just as common, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it was. It was a tricky lake. I mean,
what about your capture of it, Oz? Did you? Well, how many fish did you caught out of there previously to that?
Right. So I went back on there in 2007 in the spring, and Conningbrook was a tough water, as we said. It was probably the toughest challenge that I had set my stall out for, just in terms of catching carp.
Sorry, was
generally.
this challenge? You were saying that it was in the edge, and then it got out into open. Did that make it harder to catch? Was it as regularly?
No, I mean, compared to some of the other fish, like let's say white tips, some of the other originals, they do, double the amount of captures that old two-tone would do, throughout the year. So, yeah, I mean, location-wise, it was difficult to track that fish, to pin that fish down. It only showed itself every now and again. It wasn't like launching itself out all over the place. You'd see it every now and again, but it was a hard. You were actually having to double guess it a lot of the time. You could follow the pack around, the pack of showing fish, but that very rarely ever produced the bite off that two-tone. But I 2006, I'd done a winter on a lake up further up the valley, and I was unsure with what exactly to do with myself. And one really cold morning, I'd been up late in the night, and I'd seen a headlamp opposite, in the early hours of the morning. In the morning, I see it was my old mate Johnny Mack, so I've gone round to see him. And he's like, "Oh, did you see that one at 2:30 this morning? Show over there." I was like, "Yeah, I see that." And we were having a chat, and we couldn't get a bite out of this lake at the time. It was fishing really hard. And we was having this general discussion, and he said, "What are you doing this year?" And I was like, "I don't know, really." I said, "I really ought to think about getting on that Conningbrook, but I've got a few other options." And he just said to me, "Oz, get yourself over there. Like, get the ticket, don't mess about, go and pay for the ticket, go and start in the spring." He said, "Do not mess about." And John's like a proper old campaign angler, and he knows, he gets his tickets, and he always one step ahead of the game and all that. And I just thought, do you know what, I always listen to people, and I thought, he's absolutely right. If I don't do this now is the right time. Can't leave it too much longer. It's an old fish. I was sort of, I didn't know, I wasn't sure, did I really want to join what I considered was possibly the rat race at the time? You were fishing for the biggest fish in the country, with a lot of really good anglers that mainly probably had a lot more time than me and a lot more resources at their fingertips. And I thought, what I had got in my favour was the fact that I had that real desire, and I lived fairly locally, and I didn't have to do sessions. I could do I could split my fishing time up. So if the weather wasn't quite right, I didn't have to do my 2 nights and then be off. I could do a night, get some bait in or whatever, see where the fish were, and then I could come back in a few days' time and do another trip. So I thought, I've got things that work in my favour. I've just got to make it work for myself. So I was like, right, I'm going to do this. This is it. So yeah, 2007, I started on Conningbrook. And that first year, with a lot of hard work, lot of observation throughout the dark hours, a lot of staying up all night, mooching around the lake in the early hours of the morning, just trying to find and track down where the fish were going and what they were doing under certain weather conditions and at certain times of the year, just putting all them pieces together. And yeah, after a while, I started getting a bit of a pattern of what was happening. And the first bite came, I think it probably was at the end of April, lovely old carp known as the dolphin. And I think that was the catalyst to me that I could catch them on bait. I'd been trickling bait in for about a month, not a lot. And I'd found this little patch of gravel. I'd put probably a couple of pound of bait on it, small boilies, and fished a hinge rig over the top of, from memory, and that rattled off, and I was like, they're catchable, they're eating bait, or that one's eating bait, I can get them eating bait. Will the big one eat bait? It's been caught in feeding situations. You had to have faith in what you were going to do. Otherwise, you might as well. You would tie yourself up in knots, going, "I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. I'm going to put a single grain of maize on, out in the silt." I had to have a plan. I've always got a plan. It might be fluid. I might change things up a little bit to see, depending on what I find. But I had the plan, and that was I was going to bait these fish, and I knew that if I got the right opportunity at the right time, that big one would eat at the right time of year, and that's all you had to go on, really. But by the end of that first year, I'd had 12. Now, someone did say to me in another interview, they were like, actually, the capture of the big one is amazing, but you actually had a lot of carp out of the brook. And I'd never really thought of it like that. But looking back on it, I don't think I could have angled that place any better than what I did. I was focused. I had the desire and the want to prove something to myself and to achieve what was almost felt like at one point the impossible. When I first went, it's like this is out of reach. So it was something that I really wanted to do, and I thought, I've had 12, a few repeats.
Did it seem like you were doing anything remarkably different to everyone else? We talked about Lee's capture with the bread and stuff, but
I didn't do anything. I didn't like Brownie's card. I wasn't like some people are good at what they that's their thing, that's their method, and Lee did his thing and he did it well, and you look at all those guys that caught that fish over the years, they all caught it doing what they do well. With confidence.
That's the key, isn't it?
This is how I'm going to catch it. I've got my method. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to see it through, and this is going to be the end result. And generally, that's how they did it, and that's how they caught it. So I knew that when they broke that channel through, my mate Si had been baiting that lake, and he caught a lot of fish on boilies, which was rare for in there. It was like a lot of the time it was a single boilie, or if you caught them, it was over a handful of hemp with a grain of corn in there, or a single chopped tiger when they were allowed. I think there was no nuts allowed in the end, so a lot of it was vegetable matter with salty maize or a few mayples or whatever, sweet corn, and then in the autumn it was like, I'll just chuck bright singles out to the silty zones and what have you, and that type of thing. So there were people baiting, don't get me wrong, there were people that had done well putting a bit of bait in. And I just knew that if I worked hard enough at it and found them in the right areas, I could put things in my favour. And what essentially became the key at the end of it was finding them at like between like 1 and 3 in the morning. When they started to show in a zone at that sort of time, that's where they would be feeding in the morning.
That would be a feeding zone.
Yeah, quite often, if you'd start seeing them showing at 6, 7 o'clock,
don't listen to that. Or
it was over.
Yeah, right.
You either had a take, or they were already going somewhere else, or they'd gone, or they weren't actually having it there. But when I was walking around,
and they were quite localised areas, were they?
They were fairly localised, yeah, and you had this situation where you had the back lake and the front, so the old lake, the main lake, the sort of 17, 18 acre chunk was their natural home, but the ones that Terry Gleb had bred on in his pond from spawn, he chucked in the back lake, which was a separate entity at one time while they were working it, and then eventually they cut through the causeway bank and the two lakes became one. So those fish that had been in that back lake, that had all that old boilie, that when people were going home they chucked the last couple of kilos in I'll feed Terry's fish, they suddenly merged with the original stock. Now the original stock were the snotty one, the ones that would stick their fingers up at your boilies and just eat 3 mouthfuls of snails and all that. But suddenly these other fish were part of the mix, and they'd been eating boilies for a good while, and it created, I think, a new dynamic, a new competition. And my mate Si Bate, he capitalised on that fairly quickly with his baiting scenario. And I just thought, if it's been done before, it can be done again. Albeit I think Si caught it off of his baited area on the traditional two-tone method, seen something show, flicked a bright one at it and caught it. But he caught a lot of fish leading up to that point by applying bait really, really sort of consistently. And I knew that was possible. So
you were all in on bait?
I was all in, yeah. I've always been a bait man. I've always relied on bait to be my strength. I've never fished long sessions. I've always kept to, a night, overnighters or 2 nights mainly in the past. And I've always relied on being able to either get to the lake and bait or find little areas where no one fished and encourage the fish to use them, or quiet zones. There's always somewhere you can find on every lake where you can get fish to eat bait in a safe way, and once they get a good taste for it, as Pete always says, they start looking for you. And when you get that scenario, you fish with immense confidence. And if I couldn't get the areas I want, I'd go, well, actually, I'm going to go there because I know they turn up there. And if I just set a couple of real subtle little traps, I've got a really good chance of a bite, because when they turn up, it's like a safe thing for them again, So I approached Conningbrook like that. But it sounds easy, but it was a lot of hard work. You were up against some of the sharpest, most ruthless anglers out there who all wanted the same thing. They all wanted a shot at that big mirror, and a lot of them are travelling. I've heard a lot of daft stuff said about Conningbrook, like, you couldn't. It was only the certain few that could get to fish it, and it was an open ticket. You could join Mid-Kent Fisheries for a year, and then anyone could apply to fish Conningbrook. And there was people from all over the place. We had a guy from Liverpool them 2 years I was fishing there, Scouse Joe, lovely fella.
It's surprising though, isn't it?
It was incredible.
But yeah. Actually catching two-tone. I mean, is an added bonus as well that it was the British record as well. And
it was just, that was what it was. But
yeah.
It was, so the second year, it was a little bit of a slow start, but I ended up having a brace, which is a real cool thing for Conningbrook. A brace of mirrors in the morning was something special. And then had a little bit of a lean period. Then when the weeds started coming up, I tracked them down, started getting a few bites. And by early August, first week of August, I'd had 20 fish over the time that I'd been there. So I'd had eight more bites that second year, including obviously a few repeats. So I didn't catch all the fish in Conningbrook by any stretch of the imagination. But I'd had 20 bites, which was, looking back on it, a phenomenal chunk of angling rolled up into a few months fishing, really. But it was now mid-August. If you remember from what I said before, the lake was peaking at that time. It was crystal clear, really weedy. I'd say it was, it was stuffed to the brim with natural food. Snails floating everywhere. There was crustacean, shrimps. It was alive. The hatches that went off on that place were phenomenal. So it was, the lake was right in its prime, if you like. And we'd had no algal bloom that year, which was a bonus. And I'd been feeding 2 or 3 different areas of the lake, and I'd gone down in between nights. I'd gone down one afternoon for a look about, and I'd sat down the far end of the lake, and there'd been a lot of fish in the bay for weeks, it seemed. But after sitting there watching them for a period of time prior, I'd noticed a lot of the fish were these small commons. I'd seen 1 or 2 better fish in there, but I just didn't feel them big uns were using that bay as much as they should have been with the amount of carp there. I thought there's something missing. And I remember sitting on this bit of bank. I think I was the only one there. And I heard this coot scream out from up the other, and all of us know, all the listeners, they know as anglers, we know that cry, everyone looks, don't they? That's either a fish showed or the coot swam along and a fish has spooked it or whatever. And it was right up the other end in this area called Perfume Bay, which I'd been baiting for about 6 weeks. I'd had that sighting of two-tone in that area. I'd put a huge volume of pellet into that zone, and the weed had all been ripped to pieces weeks prior. But I'd caught a fish called the Little Friendly Common, and then it died a bit of a death. So I carried on baiting it anyway, and this coot had cried from that area. So I was like, grabbed a little bag, legged it up there, and there's a climbing tree that looks out over Perfume Bay. And I got up in this climbing tree, and old Mother Coot was still sort of tapping her feet on she'd obviously been spooked by a good fish. And she had the youngsters had all been pushed away into the reeds by this point. And in this hole in the weed, out in the middle of the bay, was this giant carp. Clearly two-tone, obviously. Just sat there. All in, I didn't see another carp in the vicinity. Like lording it up in his own bay. My bay. Don't come near. This is my territory. And I did see a little bit of that a couple of times. I see him sat in the bay the other side of the island, and the friendly mirror approached that bay, and it was almost, as he got into the mouth of that bay, it's like the old dorsal came up, and that two-tone was in there, shuffled about a little bit, and that friendly mirror just turned and went. It was like, your space.
Really?
It was like, and yet other times, when I videoed that big mirror, all of the fish were almost like courtiers, coming almost like bowing to him. They'd be all around him and what have you. But at that same time, that friendly mirror was right over the other side of the gap. It's almost like they didn't want to. They knew to keep space.
Each other space.
They gave each other space.
Yeah,
that's how I'd say. Yeah. So it's loads of interesting little things, but he was up there on his own. So I went home, got some more bait, came back, baited my 2 spots in Perfume Bay and one off the front of the island, and I went back later. I think it was later that week, and did 2 nights. And bizarrely enough, I caught that little friendly common again. And I think I caught another one. I caught another one called the bullet hole common. Quite an odd, a rare-ish one from there. Lovely old carp. And that was from the spot that I would eventually catch two-tone from, which is literally just an underarm flick off the bank. It's a channel between the weed, and I'd nipped... Similar to with that, I'd nipped the leading edge of the weed away. So I had a nice line lay down into this, like a silty strip, but it had a few harder spots in it. You knew it had been fed on naturally, and I kept feeding it, and eventually the end of this strip was down to like pea shingle, and it was to be the following week, the weekend of middle of August, that I went back. And it was on the full moon phase.
You've caught a lot of fish on full moons. I've noticed that.
Yeah. I've so many people. It's a subject in its own right, isn't it?
There's not a definitive answer.
There's
to
no
it,
definitive. We could go around in circles, and you could talk to Joe Blogs there and so there, and they'd all have a different answer and an outlook, and everyone's got their own opinion, but. For me, there's an undeniable aspect of, the way everything works, the moon, the earth, water, and...
Sessions planned around that.
Yeah, they are now, but they never were. But you just can't... There's an undeniable pattern. When you look into the historic captures, and we're lucky to have a lot of that information available to us now, to have those... historical captures documented and being able to look back now on moon charts and stuff like that, and you go, Jesus, how could you ignore that? And it is, okay, if I can only go fishing on Tuesday, I can only go fishing on Tuesday, but my God, if I know that fish gets caught on a new moon and the new moon's on a Friday, I'll move heaven and earth to get there on the Friday if I can. And the more you stack the cards in your favour, especially with big carp angling, the more it's not just confidence and it's not just being there. You are actually you're making those odds so much higher. And yeah, like pretty much all my big fish, so two-tone come on the full moon.
Harvest moons as well,
brute.
aren't they?
Yeah, like the Milton Mirror, Harvest full moon. The Burghfield Common, funnily enough, everyone was like, oh, full moons, big commons. That came on the new moon, right on the transit time of the new moon. But we'll talk about that probably later. But yeah, so old two-tone, that was the 16th of August. I had the bite, I think it was about 6:30 in the morning. I'd had a big liner in the night. It's flat calm, moonlit night, mist. It was one of those perfect midsummer sessions. And yeah, the bite came at the normal Conningbrook time, and that Perfume Bay was choked with weed. That whole end was a huge plug of weed, and so was the bay. There was 2 sort of weediest bits of the lake, and yeah, mate, that rod fired off in the gap of Perfume Bay, and I remember running down to the rod, pulling into it. And the rod buckled over, and I think I'd say, I'm guessing that fish took 50 yards of line. Like, it was slow, powerful, progressive, but aggressive at the same time. Every time you felt like you wanted to put pressure on the spool, it would take more line at a faster. It's like you ain't stopping me, mate.
Did you have a good idea what you hooked?
No, I thought I sit here, I swear to God, I thought I had hooked the long common. I'd waited for that long common. I never did catch it.
That was
It's
a nice
gone
one,
now.
that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a right funny old creature, that
Yeah.
was. It's beautiful old carp. And it had a reputation for real proper scrap, you know.
It was kind of built for it, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
long, lean, you know, angry looking thing. And I thought, you know, the way this thing was going, I just thought, oh, I've got the old long common at last. And, nah. So it weeded me up at maybe, I was probably about 80 yards out by now, because I say I'd only hooked it 10 yards out, an underarm flick. Someone went and fetched the boat, because, I mean, you can stand there for forever and a day, and we tried all the angles to get this fish moving in the weed, and it was solid, couldn't move it. So I said, look, you know, there's no way I'm messing about. There's so many precious fish in here, just get the boat and we'll shoot out there, and once you're above them you can normally just pop them out. It's so simple. So someone went and rowed the boat up, put my life jacket on, jumped in the boat, and one of the local guys, Marshy, he took the stern of the boat and just rowed us out. And one of the vivid things that I remember was just rowing straight over the spot that I'd hooked it from, and it was like someone had thrown a napalm bomb in there.
Really?
It was just like bits of weed, just silt all puffed up, all like a smoke screen across the area, where it obviously just bolted out there at, you know, whatever miles an hour
Oh
it
my
did,
God.
this giant thing. But again, I thought I was attached to the long common, and we followed the line out, and I'm just gently reeling, and out at sort of 70 yards was this huge surface ball of weed. It had grown up out the bottom, so it was like something out of a tropical rainforest. You had this root system, a great big stalk, and then the weed had all sort of billowed over at the top like a giant mushroom. And I remember as we approached it, I could see it's crystal clear, 10 foot of water. I could see my line going down to the base of this, or like the root structure of this giant weed bed. And like I said to my right, hold the boat steady like that. And I've got over the top, and I've sort of given it a bit of a heave. And I was like, no, nothing. And I've given it another bit of a heave, and the side of the boat's slowly going down. I'm thinking, we're going to start taking on water soon. And then there was a little bit of a give. And I saw a little puff of silt come out at the bottom of the weed bed, and then another little bit of a puff. And then I just sort of saw this shape, and this shape got bigger and big, and I just saw this head, and then I saw this tail, and the head and the tail are like this far
You
apart.
know what you've got there.
And there's these big gold scales
Yeah.
like that, and his old head came round, and I could see, even in 10 foot of water, could see his eye rolling around in the head. He's thinking, oh, got to go.
Here we go again.
Got to go through this again. And I popped him out of the weed, and then the fun really sort of started. And he ran me ragged, towed me around that lake from weed bed to weed bed in front of that island for, it was over 20-25 minutes.
Imagine losing that and knowing what you'd cooked. Did you know anyone that ever done that?
I can't recall, not off the top of my head. No, not in that sort of situation where they'd had it on for a little, gone out and seen it. You know, normally it ended up in the net, sort of thing. But yeah, my mouth was dry as a bone.
I bet it was.
I'd had to take. I don't think I'd even had my first cup of tea. I think I put the kettle on, and I had this little puppy with me, my new dog, and he was sort of waiting for his breakfast, and I'd got the take in the middle of it, so I'd had no breakfast, no tea. My mouth was bone dry. I had this adrenaline surging through my body as I'm playing the fish off the bow of this boat. And as it came out of the weed bed, you just see this gigantic bulk of this fish, 8 foot down, and he'd like power himself into another weed bed, and he'd just disappear, like disappearing into a black hole.
Yeah.
You'd see it, now you see, and now you don't. You think, oh, Jesus. And more pressure, and then he'd pop himself out, and I could feel he was getting a little bit more tired and what have you, and eventually I sort of see him over the top of this weed bed, maybe 4 or 5 foot down. He sort of went onto his side, and the old head started coming up, and I thought, he's ready. And a little addition to the story, which is love for me, was amazing, and it didn't really connect until a little while afterwards. Was that my first ever net that I bought for carp fishing, I bought from my local shop called Greenfields of Canterbury, and it's a shop really dear to my heart, and I ended up working there for a while. But it was a Gardner landing net, glass fibre, and I'd had numerous landing nets since, but this one I'd cut down so it was like usable in a boat, especially for this sort of job. And it was the net that I'd landed my first ever carp in, and it was in the boat with me, and two-tone was on the set, and I netted her in the net that I'd landed my first ever carp in. And the reality of that didn't hit me till a fair while afterwards, because obviously I had a hell of a job on my hands here with a huge carp in a boat, and we had all that to deal with.
That's really poignant, that is, isn't it?
Yeah, I just put the rod down, slackened off, put the rod down, collapsed in the back of the boat, thanked Marshy for everything he'd done. Was promptly sick over the back of the boat because I was just like, the emotion was ridiculous, like the release, I was like, I just couldn't take it all in to begin with. Like just seeing that fish, such a colossal beast, and I had flashbacks to walking up the path with the little bucket with my granddad with the perch in it, like, about that big, and then all those years on, I've got the biggest carp in the land sat in the bottom of my net.
Amazing.
It's like, it's a special, that journey. It sounds so cliche, but it's nothing to do with a British record. It's nothing to do with having that type of accolade. It was to do with a personal achievement, and that was the pinnacle at the time of what I could achieve in my angling.
It's the ultimate, isn't it? Growing up and looking at those pictures, and
I grew up reading,
being one of those people.
Yeah, like Yeats. We've just looked at the bishop, haven't we? In the office next door, the picture of the bishop and Chris with that carp, and Terry with Mary, and all the special captures that have gone on. Walker with Clarissa back in the day.
People look back on your own picture, don't they? They will. People will be looking at that, and that's their inspiration as well. So
yeah, and some good friends had caught that fish. My friend John had caught that fish at a record weight, and Jacko, obviously. I mean, Jacko, we haven't even covered what I've done many, many years ago, but just a small story. I turned up one day at the school pool. My dad had dropped me off.
You were just looking at the book, Oz. Where's that book gone, actually? Yeah, it's gone.
Don't know where that's
might
gone.
have moved it over here.
Toby, are you reading it, are you?
Yeah, that's it.
Carp Fever.
Carp Fever, yeah. Well, that started
with
me
she on
that
the cover.
Yeah, with she on the cover.
Yeah.
But we turned up. My dad dropped me off. Me and my mate Peter, who was my fishing buddy when we were at school, and we looked across the pool, and I could see Jacko. He stood on top of the house bank with Ford, and he's clearly playing one. We're like, Jacko's got one. So we've dumped all our gear off in the bushes, and we've legged it round the factory bank. We want to see Jacko with a carp. We're teenagers, young, and any carp on the bank is special. So we've got round there, and I'm pretty sure Paul was just netting it for him. It was this enormous common. It was 30, from memory, I think it was 37.10.
Yeah.
But that was a Kent record common. We were there at that very moment that Jacko landed the Kent record common. That, for us as school kids, that was something else. He was a hero of everyone has to have
rare
aspirations and inspirational characters, and those guys were it for us in Kent.
You were in a good area there, weren't you? For fishing, and then for anglers as well.
We were very, very lucky as youngsters to be where we were. have who we had angling on those waters. The gravel companies like Brett's that had dug all those lovely pits through the Stour Valley, all the old pits from Dartford down through the Medway Valley. We had some classic fishing, gravel pit fishing. You had the old pools like the school pool, historic waters that anglers travelled from all over the country to come and fish. Bison Wood, which was a runs water as such, but it was famous. I think Jerry Savage, he used to do the morning breakfast radio fishing show. Can't remember what it's called now, but it was on a Saturday morning. I used to get up at 7, put it on, listen to it before I went and played rugby. Jerry Savage, and he'd caught something like 100 doubles in a season from this lake, which, talking about a long time ago. So there was lots of history, lots of really good anglers. I met so many influential people.
And the anglers were quite open as well.
Not always to begin with.
Yeah.
I certainly on my local pits, that was the intrigue for me. Me and my mate Peter, who I went to school with, who was my fishing buddy.
Trying to work out what they're doing.
That was the intrigue.
Yeah.
That was the myth. That was what it was all about to us. This cultish underground scene where you didn't know what they were doing. What are they up to?
That's a little bit lost nowadays, isn't it?
It's gone. I don't see that anywhere really. To be fair, it's I don't think anyone would even recognise it unless you'd gone through that. 70s, 80s, maybe creeping into the early 90s
as well. Yeah, maybe.
People wouldn't show you anything, and you daren't. You wouldn't even stay in someone's swim when they were reeling a rig in or something. It was all hush secret, and that had an appeal to it.
Of course,
a real appeal that is definitely lost now because everything's so open, which is great. People will find things easier to.
Well, we do stuff like
comprehend.
this nowadays, don't we? As well, and I mean, it's just more.
All you had then was the BCSG, and you had to be certain recommendations and catch a certain amount of big fish before you could enter or get invited in or whatever.
Don't you think your own angling style is a little bit like a relic back to those days, though?
Well, I work for a fishing company now, 2 fishing companies, so I've got to be a lot more open. But I think I try.
But if people saw you fishing on the bank, I
don't think people really get the way that I approach my fishing, because they probably think, why hasn't he got all the most up to date technical gear and mountains of luggage and kit with him to cover all eventualities? But the way I do things is suitable for me, and it's like I take pride in the way that I angle, and I do it as a way of keeping myself connected with the environment, if you like.
What about being a firefighter and stuff as well, though? Because there is a certain. My friend's a firefighter, as you said, and you're quite similar to each other. You're quite methodical and organised, and you've just got a certain way. I mean, does having a career like that have kind of any bearing on the way you approach stuff like that?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
Because you don't associate firefighters, although you get the odd clumsy one, but generally they're quite they're quite organised people, and
I mean, you get, like you say, in all careers and every situation, you get a variety of people, but my recruit course, I was a young man when I joined the fire service, so I'd come off of Civvy Street. I'd only worked for a few local shops and what have you, and I was pretty green, so I went into the fire service, and that recruit course, 4 months residential course, and that was run by 4 instructors. Now, 3 out of those 4 instructors were ex-military, and one of them was an absolute arsehole. He was like the horrible one, the disciplinarian. They were all of them were to a degree, but Clive was a savage. You know, he was the one that would absolutely rag you, ball you out. He would dish out all the disciplinary measures on the recruit course and what have you. And yeah, back in those days, the fire service took in a lot of ex-military personnel. It was a suitable sort of career change for those guys and what have you. So, you know, a lot of the time they were older. So on my course, there was, you know, guys from the Navy, there was guys from the Air Force, there was guys from all manner of, you know, we had paratroopers, whatever. But they were generally a bit older, 27, 28. I was like 19 coming up 20, so they had a lot more life experience. They'd been through that military disciplinarian background. They knew how to organise themselves. They knew how to deal with those stressful situations. And you learnt from them. And I learnt from them. And I learnt from them real bloody quick. Because if you didn't, you were going to get left behind on a course that was highly pressured, putting a lot of pressure on you mentally through learning huge amounts of technical information. And also physically.
Were you a physically fit person when you joined?
Well, like, you have to be. I had to train to get in. So back in those days, I think my recruit course, there was 20 places available, and there was something like 5,000 or 6,000 applications that went in. So to get to the recruit course stage, you had to jump through a lot of hoops, and you had to be fit. Otherwise, you were gone. To just get through the course, you had to be at a certain level of fitness, because they knew that if you weren't, you wouldn't get through the course. And it costs a hell of a lot of money to train a firefighter for 16 weeks to a level where he can go out onto a station. So it was tough, you know. And on that course, I started in January, and I remember that first day sitting there in the classroom, and they threw all your kit at you and what have you, and you had to go and square it all away in your locker and what have you. And then they were like, right, get in your PE kit. And then we were doing like carrying kit around the yard, whatever, just to get you warmed up. And then we went out on a cross country run with a 13 metre ladder which weighs 100 kilos, a light portable pump which weighs over 100 kilos, 4 barrels of foam, rolls of hose, various other bits of equipment that between your two squads you had to carry. So you had to organise where, you know, it's no point if Joe Blogg's up the top of the ladder. If he's 6'3" and I'm 5'6" at the other end of that, the ladder's going to be like that. So you had to make sure everything was balanced. That what they were trying to instill immediately was a sense of teamwork and a sense of organisation, and who was going to say, right, we need this done, we need that done. So off we went on this bloody cross-country run out into the middle of nowhere. We hauled all this equipment down to what I now know is the River Len. And by now it's snowing, it's January. And they're like, right, we want all the equipment over the other side of the river, blah, blah, blah. And they said, but to start with, you've got to each jump over the river. And it's only a small stream. But the first couple of guys that went over there, yeah, sweet as a nut. But by the 4th or 5th, it was just a sloppy, slippery mud bath. And everyone that went in next would like fail the jump. If you failed the jump, you had to get in the river, do 10 press-ups in the river in January. So you could see where it was all going. They were testing you, basically. They were testing whether you were going to go, do you know what, I don't like this. I don't like being shouted at. I don't like being told what to do. I certainly don't like getting freezing cold and wet and humping all this kit about. They were waiting for the first people to go, I ain't in for this. I don't like this. But, you know,
it's a challenge in itself, isn't it?
It's a challenge, yeah. And then they're getting you up at 5:30 in the morning for runs. Then you have to clean the yard. Then you have to square all the dormitory away. They come in and find a stray bit of cotton under someone's bed, and they throw the bed out of the sliding window and throw all the locker contents out. They're just testing you all the time, and you soon learn to do everything to a standard. I didn't know how to bull my shoes, so someone from the army is like, right, this is how you do it, and you get your polish and your bit of water and blah blah, and you're shining your shoes up to a high standard, pressing all your uniform to a high standard. Like, you don't want to drop the ball. You don't want to be the one that causes the whole dormitory to get trashed by the instructor the next morning or whatever. So you learned to organise yourself. You learned to be strict disciplinarian like ways about your organisation. So your locker would be a certain way, you'd do certain things, and you'd work as a team. And it was very important that you all mesh together. So I learnt really quickly that those things would help me in my life, and they do. But what they don't do in the fire service is kick the element of personality out of you. They like everyone to have your true personality, and I've always been quite spirited, and I like my adventure, and I like my own certain way of life and doing my own certain things. So I've always been able to mesh them two things together, and I think it's.
Is it a good career? Is it inducive with carp fishing, the hours you work and stuff, being a firefighter?
And
you said when you're travelling as well, you were able because of that. You were able to save hours, and it
was an amazing place to work. I mean, what youngster wouldn't grow up and think, God, I'd love to ride on the back of one of them trucks. Do you know what I mean? It's something that everyone would like to, or think, I'd like to have a go at that. I'd like to see what that's like. And those hours were the perfect sort of way to be able to spend my time moving forward. Shift work's a funny one, really. I wasn't sure about it at first. I was thinking, nights, is that going to suit me?
London's Burning on the screen here, Tope.
Yeah, I just found an old school picture of us.
That was a gas explosion in
God blimey,
Faversham. Yeah, that
was a mess. That wasn't it? Is that the building in the background?
Yeah, in the background on the left. It completely blew a 2-story Victorian terrace to pieces. There's nothing left.
Anyone in there?
Yeah, there's an old lady in there, 80 years old.
Is she okay?
And she was blown out into the garden.
And survived.
And she was all right, yeah.
Wow.
Which is, those sort of jobs, they're fantastic. When there's a good outcome and it's just a bit of gritty, hard work, they're fantastic, That's what you join the job for. You join the job to help people and in their hour of need.
Well, I hear this quite a lot, and a friend will say, "Yeah, we went to a good one today. That was going up really, really well." And it's like
good one.
That's the weird, the fire brigade sort of humour. We love them going jobs. We we train to do those sort of things, and it's a bit weird, but. Obviously looking back on it, you always want the best, and every time those bells went down, you knew that there could be someone in dire need of your help. So
my friend had a good one actually a couple of years ago. Okay. They were called out in the winter. There was a cat stuck on the roof.
Yeah,
and it was like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So he was leading the crew out there, pull into the estate, and a guy comes out and he goes, "Oh, it's that way." And he said, "Oh, was it your house?" Yeah. And the guy said, No, it's just that way. And a friend said, "Well, that was a bit weird." Gets to the house, there's no one in the house.
Yeah.
And then this woman comes out of the other house, and she's drunk apparently. She said, "Oh, it's my cat. It's stuck up. It's been up there for hours, and it won't come down. We've been trying for hours." And my mate goes, "Right, where is it?" You can imagine what his attitude was towards that. And he's looking at it going, right, how are we going to get this done? And then the other female fighter goes around the other side of the house and just goes... He just jumps straight down
into it. Yeah. I mean, you
they're
can't...
good calls, aren't they?
They are, yeah. I mean, you don't go through a career in a fire service without someone going, "How many cats you got out of trees?" And you do. We've been out and got cats out of trees.
We had
every
to mention a cat on the podcast.
Yeah. I did get a swan off a roof once.
Did you?
Yeah, a swan flew into some power lines, broke its wing, and landed on the flat roof, like a 3-story building. So we put the ladder up, gone up there, and of course, every time we've approached the swan, it's gone to
Bloody hell, yeah.
go off the end. So we ended up lassoing it, and flicked the lasso off, and my mates pulled it, and we've grabbed this swan. And I remember walking it down the ladder, and it's curled its old head around me, neck, and put its little beak here, and I had to hold on to it for a couple of hours till the RSPCA, and we got a special bond, me and that swan, after that time.
Swans could be a little bit misunderstood, can't they? Actually,
honestly,
they could be really gentle. Actually,
it was lovely. It just laid its head there, and it was absolutely fabulous, and yet we swear and curse them all the time when they're going through our lines, or they're protecting they're just, protecting their environment. They're young. They've got territory, haven't they? And
a guy showed me on the lake a few years ago. There was a swan with some braid round it, and we got the swan in, and he worked with swans, and he said, right, just hold it. Hold it round gently, and it was absolutely fine. It didn't flap its wings or anything. No. It just
once you get hold of them, they're sound.
Yeah, all this flapping wings and breaking arms and stuff like that.
No, it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
I did have a friend of mine that grabbed one by the neck once and it reared up and used its claws.
I think it's probably grabbing it around the neck and stuff as well.
You've literally just got to get. Once you've got hold of them, they just go. They're quite silly. They're just like.
Yeah, they go all gentle.
They're all gentle, yeah.
Oh, do you mind me? What's the story behind that picture, mate?
That one there. So that's that was a job in my hometown. That was a good few years ago now. So we were called out to that again about this time of year. Actually, it was a red hot day.
Yeah.
The fire had started in a boiler on the first floor above those garages next to that ladder. And it had gone up through the partition walls, and you what you can see there is pretty much the full roof has collapsed into the road.
Yeah.
Well, about a few minutes before that picture was taken, I was on the third floor of that building with my BA partner trying to put that fire out. Now. At that time, I'd probably had 22 years of experience in the fire service, and my sort of main role in the fire service was breathing apparatus wearer. I was on the back of the trucks. That's where I started my career, and that's where I ended my career. And during that time, I became a breathing apparatus instructor. So the breathing apparatus is the tank of air and mask and what have you that you put on to be able to survive in smoke-filled atmospheres. So, I was pretty clued up with all the signs of fire and flashover, backdraft, this type of thing. Had a lot of experience. We'd already had one wear in this building, and as you can see, it was fully developed in fire at that point. We'd gone back in for a second wear to go up in and try and stop the fire travelling through the roof voids into the other buildings, and my BA partner was in the corridor outside the main bedroom that I was trying to tackle this fire, and I was sort of going in on the end of my leash because you're attached via a line to your partner, and as far as I could get in, I was putting water into the room and it was just vaporising. The conditions were so hot, and I was in contact with her verbally, asking her what the conditions were like in the corridor outside, because obviously I was really aware that we were on a quite a crucial stage of the fire, and the conditions inside the bedroom that I was working in were deteriorating rapidly, and I made the decision that we were going to have to drop all of the equipment that we'd carried up there and probably make our way out as quickly as possible. I knew that it was going to be things were on the cusp of going very badly wrong, and I sort of came out the few feet from this bedroom, and my BA partner was sort of crouched down in the corridor of this third floor like landing way really, and I could just see the smoke had changed colour and whatever. And I said, right, we've got to drop everything and get out. We made it to the top of the stairs before we heard the evacuation whistle blowing from outside, and I'd started to hear the roof collapse. And she wasn't from my station, so I wasn't with one of my usual BA partners, but she was a switched on firefighter, and we knew that we had to get out of there like pretty damn quick.
How much time have you got? You
ain't got no time. Like, you've got no time. You had to be out of there. You just didn't feel like there was any time. I remember, like, I think I jumped down that first flight of stairs. I think I cleared the last 6 or 8 stairs, and my BA partner's like behind me, and we're just like running. And we'd already, on the way up, I'd said to her, like, we've got to maintain our egress out of here because this is like quite a sketchy situation. So we'd made sure that we'd got a clear run going out. And all you could hear was this crescendo sort of noise of collapsing masonry and what have you. And we made it down to the first flight of steps. So underneath that ladder to the right hand side, that's the door to that building. And there's a little garage unit next door with green doors. That's where we were rigging with BA and what have you. So that would have all been full of firefighters before this collapse. And we made it to the bottom of those stairs, and I thought I could see the light of the door, and then I could see an officer standing over by these railings at the back here, and he's going like stopping us coming out the door, because obviously we couldn't see at the time, but
it was collapsing out.
Huge amounts of falling. I mean, those ladders had been propped back up since those ladders were off of that building when we came out. They were on top of the fire engine.
Right.
The fire engine's already been moved.
So blimey, you could have come hurtling out of there then, and then copped it with
falling debris. Yeah. So we had to wait. Like, obviously, we wanted to get out because we didn't know how much of the building was collapsing inside. And as soon as the coast was clear, like, we've just dived out of that door and round into that garage area. So we were like, we just like ripped them arse off. Like, Jesus, that's a close.
Yeah,
that's
you've been in many of those.
Not collapses like that. Like, normally by that stage you would have been probably like out of that situation. But obviously modern buildings.
That's a really new building, isn't it?
That had only been, I think that had only been up 10 years, something like that.
Yeah. But it's an exciting career, isn't it?
Oh, extreme! Rewarding, exhilarating. Stressful at times. Yeah. Like we've spoke about earlier. You're talking about people's lives, family. You could be in situations whereby you're seeing things that you don't really want to ever see in your life. I've seen a lot of horrible things, but I've also helped, people out of a lot of situations. Along with, obviously, with the fire service, it's teamwork. So your BA is always 2 of you minimum. Your crew on your truck, that you do everything together. So everything's a team effort. And you get through things as a team, and there's always someone that's good at something and someone that's not so keen on that, and someone that, like, for instance, I always liked the trauma care. My dad was a paramedic for God knows how many years. I was always interested in that side of it. It was always part of the fire service that I was quite keen on, so I trained and did stuff in that. So, if someone needed resus, I'd help to do that. But there was, everyone had different roles, really. Do you know what I mean?
But it's shaped you for sure, then, hasn't it, in some way?
Without a doubt, it shaped my personality. It's enabled me to see life through different eyes than a lot of people. A different perspective. Yeah, definitely.
We better mention Burghfield Common.
Yeah, it's another big campaign.
A toss up between the Two-Tone and Burghfield Common then. Which one for you?
Well, again, that is a question I've been asked many times by many different people.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
we
I'm
thought we had
sorry,
a
Simon.
No.
It is because I suppose you're looking at two huge fish, two like pinnacle captures, if you like, for on a personal level, and yeah, I mean, for the journey, for everything that it stood for how much I had to sacrifice and put into it, the Common pips the mirror to the post.
It was a longer campaign.
It was a longer campaign, and as I said to you before, a story, any type of story is so important to me, and time builds a story. You meet more people, you do more things, more events happen in that time, generally. And when you build a story of that length with that many highs and lows, it can't fail to become a bit of personal magic to you. You know, with memories, those lakes, if they make memories, then they've done. You've achieved what you set out to achieve as an angler, because we all love to sit and watch the sunrise, don't we? I love it. I love to sit in a beautiful environment and watch the sunrise or the sunset, go through that 24-hour period and think, oh yeah, you know, we had rain. It's just being there that creates something in your own mind that you can then take when you go back to work. You go, God, that was lovely. You know, you're having your tea break and you're thinking.
But being on those lakes with those really special carp in them as well, though. I mean, especially that one. That fish is an absolute enigma, isn't it?
It you know.
Yeah, I mean, you said two-tone was a solitary fish. I mean, the Burghfield Common. It sounds.
It's. I don't know. I mean, I saw it a number of times when I fished there, and it seems like that when you get to certain periods of the year, certain weather systems or whatever, or natural phenomena like the spawning situation and things like that, that fish will turn up at certain areas of the lake.
Were those areas that it would get caught from?
Well, they were the areas that it had been caught from when I went there. So it's hard to ignore the fact that even though it's not in them areas for the bulk of the time you're there, they were the areas that it had been bloody well caught from. So why hadn't it been caught from various other areas of the lake where huge hits of fish had been taken by exceptional anglers in the past, but no Common? What, you know, everyone asks the same question.
Sure,
and yet it turns up in that bloody little system of dikes and ditches, as I used to call it, you know, in mosquito infested channels
so
behind
Terry
the river.
caught it out of there, didn't he?
Yeah.
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 Is he the only one is it been caught out of there many times?
Nearly every capture.
Right, okay. Yeah.
That is the most, you know, from day one, like the earliest documented capture I know came from Weedy Bay. Then, like,
how many times has it been caught now?
Oh God, it's got to be 13, 14 times.
It's not much though, is it?
It's not much, no. So you, like, when I went there, can't even remember all the details now, but it probably had been caught 6 times to our knowledge. So when I went there, a local guy, Darren, had caught it from the dog leg again at £57 plus. So before that, Nigel's capture from the shallows, which is still sort of part of that system. Capture before that, Malcolm Tabb from the dog leg. Capture before that, a chap called Danny, I believe, from Weedy Bay, entrance to the dog leg. Did you see a pattern emerging here?
A little bit.
So do you know what I mean? And I'm there, and then inevitably Terry catches it because I fished sort of on the lake while he was there for a period of time, and when he's on your lake and he's on his game, he's going to catch what he needs to catch. He's an exceptional angler, and he's got vast deposits of experience from all manner of lakes over a lot of time. So you know that he's going to do the job at some point. It's just when. And you know, I was interested to see his little film that he did at Christmas with the Burghfield Common, and you know, as he rightly said, so many people with a lot of time and a lot of research have looked at that situation and gone, no thanks. It's just a lot to ask of a lot of people. Now, you know, and moving down the line, there's a lot of other big fish in there now, which makes the dynamics a little bit different. But yeah, then Terry caught it. Where did he catch it from?
Dogleg, yeah.
Pretty much the same little zone as that Darren had caught it from. And I'm sort of scratching my head now thinking, fuck's sake. I can't sit. I'm a travelling, so I'm not a local lad. I've taken on that task of fishing for the Burghfield Common. It's a 2+ hour drive to the lake on some of the busiest motorways. So that journey might have taken me 5 hours after work, depending on how busy the motorways were. And I'm fishing between shifts at work for 2 days a week, predominantly. So I'm getting 2 days up on Burghfield and a whole shift at the fire brigade and family time in between before I can go back. So there's no like, I'll just pop up the lake for a quick hour or 2 hour walk round this evening and see where the fish are, drop a bit of bait in, sort of thing. You know, I'm back at work, family commitments, other stuff to do. And when I'm going back, it's like a fresh start. So I am scratching my head because my whole plan was to just keep walking the lake when I was there, try and find it as many times as I could. You know, this is before I'd been up there. And you get up there and you think, no, that ain't happening. I'll walk it every day, but you ain't finding that fish every day. You're just guessing a lot of the time. And you can get on fish. I didn't realise how many fish there were in the lake. I didn't know about those blue pool escapees and what have you. I just thought it was the common, a handful of old leanies and a few stockies. But it transpired there was quite a lot of other fish in there. Which is only ever going to make your task that much harder. But I didn't know how big they were at the time either. They were growing rapid. And that was kept quite quiet for quite a long time. Because you got to remember that, I've touched Regan's frog. Oh,
it's not going to, don't worry.
No. Hey, I've got some anti-bac over here.
I just thought, no. Anyway, what was I saying? So you ain't going to find it all that much. And those fish were getting bigger and they liked a bit of bait. So I sort of used that first year as a little bit of a recce almost. Now that sounds mad. It's like a year's worth of angling. But Burghfield's a big lake. It's a lot of travelling. It takes a long while to learn it's a complicated lake. Full of bays. I think there's something like 25 plus islands on the lake, lots of channels, big sections of open water, out of bounds, all sorts, to put people in the picture that don't know. So it's a massive task, 90 plus acres of water, 6 or 7 mile perimeter because you've got so many convoluted pathways and what have you. Loads of overgrown areas where you've only got like deer track access to the margins, so you'd have to get on your hands and knees and crawl to the edge to look at certain marginal areas and whatnot. Bloody hard work.
Would you have just stayed there until you caught it then, Oz?
I planned. So when I planned to go there, I was under no illusion as to how hard that would be to catch that fish. And I thought, do you know what? I'll give it 5 years. When I'd seen Burghfield and walked it and been there a couple of trips, I loved that lake. I fell in love with it almost from the first time I got there. I walked onto Pingewood Point. There were ferns, there was woodpeckers drilling in the trees, there was this crystal clear water sparkling, there was big old 80-foot dead trees in the on the islands and weird houses, and it was just an intriguing lake.
It is.
That captivated me from the moment I got there. Now, as we said earlier, if that's available, if that feeling's available, I'll stay there until I catch what I want to catch, and I've had enough. If I don't get those feelings, I might not even bother. I could quite easily have drove home and said to myself, I'm going to get another ticket. I don't like it. It's not my cup of tea. But mate, that place just got right under my skin from day one. And after I said I'll give it 5 years, I was like, end of April, I saw the fish come off the shallows into a swim called the 30s. There's a little shallow gravel plateau in front of an island. And she came in and I was up a tree. You know, you weren't meant to be up trees on Burghfield. There's a rule from CMEX, you weren't meant to climb trees. But you can't fish a lake like Burghfield and not creep up a tree here and there. So I was, and I saw this fish come in, and I was like, "Is that 2 or is that 1?" That's 1. Oh shit, that's 1. Oh, and as she came into view, this great big belly swolled out like a. She was obviously it's prior to spawning. All the scales were stretched open. You could see all these white gaps. Enormous. This is April, end of April, and I saw this fish, and she came round the front of the little gravel plateau and sort of flanked off the side of it. And I always remember that first, watching her do that, and then when I caught her, just looking at how burnished her scales are on her shoulders, where she obviously heavily flanks on those muscle beds out on the bars and what have you. It was great, but. Yeah, when I clapped eyes on her, I was like, 5 years, I ain't going anywhere till I've caught that fish.
Really? Yeah.
Well, you know, and I think I had a chat with James Turner right back at that start of and he said, "Oh, what would you?" I said, "Mate, either the fish dies or I die or I catch it," and that was it. And a lot of people said, "Oh, yeah, but it's a common," and I'm like, "Yeah, but." That is the most magnificent fish. To me, it summed up carp fishing for me in all its best.
I think it's the last one of that era.
Yeah, the elation of catching that carp will remain with me forever.
The circumstance when you caught it. Didn't you say that your wife, did she draw your picture or something before? And there were
it was so bizarre. She'd so there's a couple of weird things. So I'd come home from work off my night shift to go to Burghfield, and she'd draw me this big. I've still got it at home actually. This picture of a big fish, and you know, good luck, BC, whatever. And I was like, bloody hell, she never does that. It's really weird,
doesn't she?
No. And then the next really weird coincidence was that I'd caught two-tone on the 16th of August 2008. And this trip was now the 16th of August 2008. I'd seen the Burghfield Common 2 weeks prior on... had I seen it 2 weeks prior? Yeah, it was 2 weeks, yeah. And I'd been waiting for a particular moon phase. We were now moving into this sort of this early, you know, it was late August. I was now planning, really. I'd almost wrote off the other area, thinking I've actually got to start planning for the autumn now. And I'd been fishing Dinton at the time as well.
Did that speed things up for you? Because you had a dilemma with Dinton and Burghfield at the time. Yeah,
what it did, it allowed me some breathing space away from, but to get my thoughts together and work out what if I was doing anything, what I was doing wrong. Was the baiting situation wrong? Was the area wrong? Was I attracting too many fish? Because essentially what I was doing after that initial year of learning Burghfield, I was basically running around the lake like a lunatic with flinging chod rigs at them wherever I could find them. just getting on as many fish as I could, and learning as many different areas as I could. I'd by that time I'd hidden the bike in the woods, chained up under a bit of a sheet, and I'd got a boat up there, and I'd got various other things just in case, because the lake's full of buoys and snags, and you just think to yourself, well, I'm fishing for probably the best fish I'm ever going to catch. I want to give myself every chance to achieve this goal, and the fishing is savage up there. Snags, there's old machinery in the lake, backfill, bars covered in zebra mussels. It is brutal. But by the end of that first year, I sort of thought to myself, my plan moving forward with the amount of fishing there was my usual big fish plan. Get as many bites as you possibly can, and it will turn up.
Makes sense.
And they nearly always do. But normally big mirrors. Big commons can be awkward in that scenario, especially this one that had only ever been caught from the oddest little areas over little pinches of bait. And it's just, you could never say it didn't play on your mind. And we all of us that were fishing the lake that did speak to each other regularly had different little ideas and different plans of how we were going to approach or catch it, which is great because it meant you were all doing something, whatever, and you weren't really getting in each other's way too much. But there, it doesn't matter how much experience you got, and doesn't matter how much you put into something like that. When months and then years go by, and you still haven't caught it, you start to scratch your head and go, how many do I have to catch to get that one to make a mistake? Have I lost it? I never had a situation where it was at the net and it came off, but I had a couple of situations where I thought that was possibly close. That could have been it. You just sort of get that funny feeling. Like when Nige caught it, a couple of people that caught it alongside a lovely old carp called the Classic Carp. And I'd seen it with that Classic Carp. A lot of other people see it hanging around with that. And there was another common that used to hang around with it. And then when Nige caught it, he had like double belly, which is what the old lean is. Then the Classic, or the other way around, and then the common. Well, one morning I had double belly, then the Classic, and then I'm phoning up my missus going, I'm not coming home tonight, because I used to do 2 nights, but if there was an exceptional thing, I used to be able to blag a 3rd night if I was lucky, and occasionally I'd phone work up and say, because I work bank holidays a lot, and you'd keep them days in lieu for these sort of scenarios, I'd be like phoning up, how many guys we got on Monday? We got enough I can have a day off. And I've wasted so many of them. I did that a couple of times with that particular scenario. Thought, I'm having the common tomorrow. I'm staying. This is it. This is my time. And nothing. And I look back and I think, Christ, Terry had multiple catches from various areas of the lake without catching the common. An angler, proper old school angler, Alan Welch, had multiple hits out of various areas of the lake. No common. And he caught the stock time and time again. I'd already worked through a huge chunk of the stock over the 2 or 3 years. I'd had repeats of some of the real key fish. There were certain swims that would do a lot of bites. The common had never been caught from them swims. And you think, how much time do I waste in there? Shall I waste any time in there? Shall I hide myself away down the ditches and back channels on the off chance that fish might drift in at 2 o'clock in the morning? And you're fishing. I can't fish I haven't got the time. I haven't got the mentality to be able to just sit there. I need something going on to captivate me. So I had to do what I was doing, but tweak it, make changes. So I backed off with the amount of bait that I was using. I spent some of my time over at Dinton so that I wasn't like, I didn't have this fixation on certain areas and certain bits of bait, and I worked upon the sightings that I'd had over the experience that I'd had on that lake, and it paid off.
The area that you called it from, that was the scaffold.
Yeah, so the scaffold,
and that was into open water. It
was the first, as far as I'm aware. I don't know of any. I mean, Piers caught it off of Barnett's Point, which was the 1990s. So that's the little channel, the little channel that splits the two ends of the lake. But yeah, my capture was the first capture of that common at that end of, or the open water section of Burghfield. And although there had been losses, documented losses of it down in the Alsatian Bay, which is a lovely intimate little bay. The common used to get there a hell of a lot, and I do believe it's been lost there. I don't think that fish fed all over the lake. There was just certain areas where it was more vulnerable, and I think there were certain times where if you had a big group of fish out in that open water, like Daryl, I saw Daryl's podcast and he mentioned when he was on there early, he caught, I think, his first few fish from the swim to the right of where I caught it, and he'll tell you when those packs of fish turned up in that open water, and you know you had to fish within your boundaries of the buoys, so there'd be multiple shows at distance, but you'd be getting bites 20, 30 yards out, and they would come in and just decimate everything in their path. And you get, boom, one take, boom, two. I've had multiple takes, and the common just didn't turn up. Just didn't turn up. But I've no doubt she was there. You know, the times that I saw her show out in that open water, I was seeing multiple shows. And then, boom.
Did Dave Lane catch it with quite a few fish?
So he had it. He had 3 or 4 bites, I believe.
Didn't he? Yeah.
And the one that he caught, I think it was before the common, was that classic carp that I mentioned had been caught with the common X amount of times before.
So that was pretty much the only fish that you'd ever see that swimming around with.
No, I'd seen it with another common as well.
But fish that tend to sort of feed or be more individual, they're always going to be harder to catch anyway, aren't they?
Whenever I saw that carp in the intimate areas of the lake where you can view it, because you can't, apart from it showing, like lumping out at 150 yards, clearly the common, you know, if you've got eyes on it, you don't know that it's out there with all them fish. But when it's in the corner of Weedy Bay or the bungalow bank of Alsatian, you're clapping eyes on it in close in environment, and you're like, yep, there's the common. And 9 times out of 10, it was on its own. There might be some fish in the entrance to the bay or sat in that weed over there, but 9 times out of 10, the common was with 1 or 2 other carp or on its own.
So you did take a leap of faith there, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting story. The rods were in the water longer that morning, which was quite unusual for Burghfield.
So, I mean, there was sort of documented history that I'd managed to glean that fish had been caught in the early, lunchtime, earlier hours of the afternoon, a number of times, a handful of times. So I knew it was always, if you were in the right area, it's always good to have the rods out at that time.
How difficult was it to have the rods in the water with all the boats and stuff going on there?
Well, in that zone that I caught it from, you would either probably get cut off by a prop because they'll come around the other side of the scaffold tower, or you're just fishing. I mean, if you hooked a fish and it ran 50 yards, you could have your line and the fish out and I'd never take that risk. If the boats were backwards and forwards, it would just,
So it was a rarity to be fishing out at that time.
It was pretty rare to have the rods out at that time of the afternoon. And so I'd gone up on the 4th anniversary of catching two-tone to fish that that lake, and it was on a new moon phase instead of a full moon, which I caught the big mirror on. And I'd seen the fish a few weeks previously. I'd had bait going in on that area for a number of years, on and off. I'd moved to different zones at times, but it was an established area for me. And I sat there in the morning, and you can imagine I've got that scaffold tower out in front of me. I've got this beautiful shallow-ish plateau with a lovely southerly wind blowing in. I've got 2 rods out because it's so weedy. I've only got this one spot, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no boats. There's no engine. You know, you normally sitting there, and on a hot day you and you're like, oh no, and you're winding them in. You think I'll go for a walk, go up the pub, whatever. Nothing. And the longer the morning drew out, and it was a Friday, and I thought, I haven't seen any anglers. I was the only one on the pit. It was like it got more and more spooky and more weird and bizarre.
The stars were all starting to align.
Yeah, that my mister drew me, and it got to like midday, and I was like, I can't believe this. Because you know what, I would have probably, if the boats had come out, I would have been sat in Weedy Bay looking for that fish on a southerly wind, you know, thinking, I wonder if she's going to turn up on these sort of conditions. And I'd have probably gone back and put my rods out for the night or whatever. And I just kept sitting there, and I kept thinking, and I kept looking at my lines, and my rods were just nodding like this as the weed was building up on the line and the tips, and they were just like this in this beautiful gentle wind. And I kept looking, and I had my waders there, and the old dog, they sense things, dogs. Really bizarre. I think they pick up on your energy or something. But he was, I don't know how old he was at that point, 2 or 3 years old, and he just sat there by my rods, and he kept looking at me and looking around like that. And got to 1 o'clock just after, and I'd had no bleeps, and I had a single bleep. I've got big heavy bobbins, but there's this weed, and I kept thinking, should I clear that weed off the lines? And I thought, it's not, you know, it's just chopped up Canadian, but it was obviously going off at, and I just was praying there was going to be no boats. I've had a single bleep, and I've looked, and I could just see, couldn't see the rod tip, but I could just see this weed lifting up out of the water like that. So I've got my foot in the waders, and it's pinged out the clip, and I've just grabbed the rod, pulled into it, and I'm fishing on a small spot with a big bank of mixed Canadian and milfoil behind it, not miles out, so you've got a ski run there and what have you, and this bank of weed was sort of a plug between me and the deeper channel, the other side, and like as I've pulled into the rod, it's just hooped over. You can feel like it's solid but slow, progressive, brutal power that just stripped line off my clutch. I've like cut the spool, and I'm just sort of leaning back, and it's just, you know, when you put so much pressure in it, you have to you almost have to relent and walk forward. It's still ripping line off the clutch, and fortunately for me and the situation and the whole karma thing that goes on in angling, the plug of weed was my saviour, because that fish has got so much power, and as soon as you've got it on anything other than a short line, it can do anything to you. It could kite, you know, I don't know, I think it gets lost more than we think, because once it's sorted itself out, it seems to go on these absolutely ridiculous kiting runs. It seems to like almost know that if it kites hard left or right, it's going to either get you round an island, a buoy, a point, or into a snag. It almost, because everyone I spoke to that's caught it, unless they've caught it under the rod tip, that fish just puts as much distance between it and you as possible, and then kites so savagely and so fast, you almost think you can't keep up with it. You've lost it. But I had this safety net, this cushion, this big plug of weed, and she's just buried in it. Boom, stalemate. So I've used the time to slip my waders on properly and clamped down. I just leant back into the rod, just kept maximum pressure, steady, unrelenting pressure in weed generally tends to do the job. And it took a while. My whole back was aching a little bit at the end of it, and I was leaning back, and then suddenly you just felt that it's almost like a rocking sensation. You can feel as they're like just pushing themselves out of the weed. And anyway, out she came, and she surfaced, gone on I can't remember, she went on a left-hand or a right-hand kite. Left-hand kite to begin with, which would have been heading for the scaffold tower. And she just decided on a whim to do a 180 and head for the deep water on the right-hand side of the swim, which was a right result, to be fair. And she's like powered across the surface of the water, and I could see this big, long shape. You know, when you see the start of the boil out there and the tail's out here, and it's out there, and you're thinking, fuck, that's a big one. That is a proper big one. And you think, you dare and ever think that you've hooked the common on there. I never, ever would be so, cocky as to think of, this is it. and she's gone out towards the deep water, and I've played her out there for a period of time. And eventually, it's about 40 yards out, and she's decided then to kite left into the bay, which is to my sort of left-hand side. It's a shallow, weedy bay. And she's kiting left. She's come up on the surface again, pushed her hump out of these big shoulders. And bear in mind, can't forget I'd seen them shoulders only 2 weeks before, like literally at my feet. And I've got pretty sharp eyesight. We used to have eye tests in the fire, so I still had 6/6 vision, which is pilot eyesight. Pretty keen. And I've clocked it, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm pretty convinced I know what that is, but you still daren't think. And she's weeded me up in this bay a couple of times. I've got her out, and again, it's crystal clear. I'm now up to my chest in the water. And she's come back past me now, and she's now only a couple of rod lengths out. You ain't mistaken the Burghfield Common at 2 rod lengths out in that water. And I think at that point I went into that same sort of zone that I was with two-tone in the boat, just dry mouth, intense concentration. Feels like a bit of a I don't know, anyone that's played a real big fish that you've worked hard for will know exactly what I'm talking about. That the intensity of the moment is immense. And I've been through some intense moments at work, but this is a fish, and you're thinking, fucking hell, what have I actually done to make me feel? What have I put into this to make me feel like this? And then you realise that it's a lot. It's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work, a lot of concentration, a lot of legwork, a lot of miles, a lot of bait, a lot of money. A lot of love, and it's all hinged on that one little hook hold.
You summed that up well.
It is intense.
Didn't you land it, and then someone came up to you and said, "Have you got one?"
So I landed it, and
yeah, I have got one actually.
Yeah,
I've got it in the net, and I've put the handle of the net into the mud in the reeds, so it's just suspended. But I've dropped my rod. And I dropped to my knees, and I just put my hand in. I just wanted to touch it. I'd make sure it was all real. And I'm like, yes.
How about we put this video on?
We got the video. Great. Yeah. Look at the side. Look at the head on that.
Yes, the head is immense. That mouth is just
Those conditions look really good.
You can see what I mean now, can't you? It's like a warm southerly, just gentle southerly. 15, 18 mile an hour.
But you see you see yourself holding that fish. It's like taming a lion. That is Oz.
Yeah, mate.
It's catching the uncatchable. That
to
fish
me,
seems so
it was
difficult to catch at times.
the absolute pinnacle of everything that I'd done outside of work, sort of thing. How
many people were there doing the videos and stuff?
So when I landed it, I was in such a daze. Like, I remember turning round and this chap had turned up, Dean, and he's like, "All right, you got one?" And I didn't even recognise him. I was looking into the sun, and I was drenched in sort of sweat, and I was like, "Who's that?" He's like, "It's Dean." Like, and I fished with this chap. He's a local regular. And oh my God, yeah, there she is. Yeah,
you get some good pictures of as well.
That was my mate Stu. So I never, I knew that if I was lucky enough to ever get my moment with that carp, I've got a lot of respect for local anglers, wherever they might be. It's their patch, their territory. You've walked onto their manor as such from outside, and that comes from the surfing background, the angling, whatever. And I met a couple of local guys that had put huge amounts of effort into trying to catch that carp, and I got friendly with them, and I always said, if I'm ever lucky enough, would you do the pictures? He's like, yeah, of course I would, you know. And he'd probably seen the Burghfield Common in the water more than any other man, and he'd probably photographed it more than anybody else. And he was a local chap, and I had his number. And I said to this Dean, look, no disrespect, but we need more than just you and me here for this fish. And I need my mate and his mate to come down and help us out. He's like, yeah, I'll look after the fish, you go. And I needed to phone my wife, just tell her that I'd achieved what I'd done. So I phoned her, and then the next call was to my mate Stuart, who was working in Reading at the time with his mate Ian. And when that phone rang, I was sort of a bit choked in a way, because I thought, I'm giving him that call. And I think when he picked that phone up, he knew what was coming. Because he's like, all right, I was what you had, sort of thing. And I was like, mate, it's in the net. He went, we'll be there in 10 minutes. And he said they just downed their tools, jumped in the van, and down they came to Burghfield. And it was perfect for me, because I don't like all the razzmatazz and all the other stuff that goes along with it, really. And I wanted it to be a bit more of an intimate moment. And, Dean was he was great. And like Stuart manned the camera. He'd already taken quite a few photographs for me over the course of my time on Burghfield. So I trusted him implicitly with my camera. And, I know these days a lot of it is about the imagery and getting film footage. And as you can see, I trusted him implicitly. And
he's done a great job.
He just did me so proud. I can't ever thank him enough. Yeah, and Ian for what he did. Yeah. It was the perfect moment. I couldn't really put into words what I felt at that time. I switched my phone off.
Are you actually in the moment when you're actually holding that carp?
Oh, I was away, like I couldn't even hear what anyone was saying. I was so focused on just making sure that fish was all right and getting her back.
Well, you
safely,
keep your focus.
really.
That's the main thing.
Yeah, and like afterwards, I said to him, we got the Chinese and get a few beers, and I'm just going to reel the other rod in, spend the night in the swim. They all sort of hung around. We had food and beer and chat and what have you. And like Stuart don't drink, but he's like, get some Guinness then. All right. And he cycles he had a couple of Guinnesses. He's like, and I remember watching him about 11:30 midnight, whatever, cycling off down the track, wobbling. I thought he's had 2 Guinnesses. But yeah, it was perfect for what I wanted, and it was the perfect ending to the best mission that I'd ever sort of undertaken for a carp. But Yeah.
Has it been caught a couple of times? Scott Lloyd and Tom Stokes?
Since my capture, it didn't get caught the following year, I don't think. Then Laney caught it.
Oh, yeah, that was after.
Then Scott a few springs ago now. And then Tom was the last capture.
It's not
3 times.
But it's been caught in open water since then.
Yeah,
hasn't
so
it?
Scott caught it open water.
Tom's coming on the podcast, actually.
Yeah, Tom's story's great because he had a one of those epic journeys.
Yeah.
With loads of ups and downs, highs and lows, and he caught it from really one of the a swim that used to produce a lot of carp but had never produced the common. So that was another fantastic achievement as far as I'm concerned.
A first on there.
A first, and now, like I after the common, I went on to catch another very sort of special fish to me.
The lake next to it.
And Tom's just caught that.
Yeah,
and
I know. You're mirroring each other.
We were the only two. I was the first one to catch, I believe.
And Scott Lloyd caught
the 3.
Scott Lloyd caught baby black as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. So he had a go for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they can't resist it, can they?
Well, if you catch the common, go over to the other lake.
Yeah. It's,
That's
a cool fish.
That's a lovely. So did you just feel compounded? Did you just feel obliged to kind of just carry on fishing in the Reading area, or?
No, I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd learnt about that fish early on. Like that was that lake had a history. I remember there was a fish in there called Twisty. A guy called Jock Downs caught, and it was on a bait like pamphlet sort of thing. And it's an old leanie that had hit. It was 40 pounder anyway. It was an incredible old carp with a tiny little mouth. And it was mentioned in one of Malin's books, Fox Pool, I think. So it was in my head. And whilst I was up in the air, I'd had a look at that lake. And I'd heard a few things,
It's a different lake, that, isn't it?
It's totally different. It's shallow, big, it's very lightly fished. It's a typical, it's not your stereotypical Reading pit, if you like. So it's a bit of a throwback.
I wasn't sure what to make of it when I walked around there, actually.
Yeah. It's changed quite a bit since I fished it. It's been obviously more heavily
fished.
Yeah. I loved my time on there. It was really quiet. Whilst I was on there, a few local guys had sort of fished it. I'd found out a little bit of the history and a varied amount about the stock. A guy called Alan Cooper had caught this mirror. I hadn't seen a picture of it at the time, but I'd heard about it, and then another friend of his had caught it. By the time I went on there, that fish had been caught 4 times to my knowledge. The last capture was about, I think, 42 pounds. Anyway, there was some other nice carp in there, and I'd already spent the spring on Pingewood over the road, and I'd caught the brute, which was the other big mirror in the area. So I'd now had the Burghfield Common, the brute, and I'd like to finish the thing really with this fairly, quite an unknown mirror really.
Yeah.
Obviously the brute's a well-known mirror.
Oh, that's a character, that one.
Yeah, he's a proper old bruiser, wasn't he? Yeah, he lived up to his name, that one, that's for sure.
He did. What size was he when you caught it?
That was 48.8 there.
Yeah, it's a lovely
in early June.
Yeah.
So I caught that and I went straight onto the sailing pit. Yeah, it's like, how far can we take this? I was now deep in the realms of wanting to write a book, and I sort of held off. I'd done a few bits and pieces, preliminary chapters, and I'd got all my notebooks out, and I'd messed about at work, and when I was in the fire service, like they always used to take the piss out of me. I was like, I'm going to write this. Oh, shut up, Ozzy. Fuck off. You ain't going to write a book, you idiot. You've been going on about this for years. And, relentless piss taking and all that. And they used to see me bring my note. Oh, that bloody book, And I thought, yeah, one day.
Mm.
And, but it was great. It's so funny.
Did that change your mindset towards, having to catch a certain fish because you knew that was going to make a pretty special set as well?
It was about, I mean, I could have written the book using loads of old, 80s, 90s bits and pieces, and brought the bulk of the book up with more modern stuff, but the plan in my mind was almost set in stone, and I didn't want to deviate from it. And it was this. I wanted a set chunk of fishing, and it revolved around. Yeah,
I like
that.
It jumps straight to the point, doesn't it? Really,
it was straight to the point. It was using like a modern material. It had a flow to it. Now, I wasn't very good at school. I was a bit naughty at school. I hated school. It wasn't my forte being at school. I liked to be outside, but I tried. And my one strength was English. And my old English teacher, Mrs. Dixie, I think she'd be quite proud of me if she knew I'd written a book. But she taught me about, I like telling story. I like that story side of things, and of course you learn about that, and you learn about how to build atmosphere and whatever. And I knew that I had to have a very specific thing that I would work to. So then once I had my plan, I could get the job done. This is what I'm going to write about. These are the situations. I've got all the recall in my head. I've got my diaries and my notes. I've got all my pictures. It would be straightforward, but it sort of hinged at this point on having this triumvirate. I wanted the really big mirror. That was done. The giant, the two-tone. I wanted this like apex common, this massive Burghfield Common, and then I wanted something really unusual, something that hadn't really seen print. Now that's always a little bit sketchy, a little bit dangerous as well, because you're at risk of upsetting the apple cart a little bit. And I'd really, I'd befriended a lot of people in that area, and I didn't want to really make that messed up sort of thing. So I had to be pretty careful. I knew I was never going to name the venue. I was never going to sort of give too much away in that respect. And at the end of the day, in the modern world of carp fishing, if you want to go somewhere, you can find out where and you're going. If you really want it, you go and do it. It's as simple as that. So I just thought I'll be respectful as I can, but if I can catch this fish, that's going to be the sort of third main part of the book, the finishing sort of touches, if you like. And so, I put all my effort into that. That was one of the most enjoyable phases of angling. It was almost pure. If I wanted to bait there and come back and fish it in 2 days' time, you pretty much could. It was lovely, but them fish weren't really on bait at that time.
Right.
They were still very natural, and they would eat bait, obviously, but because it was quiet, if you baited and then fish for them down one end, they just go up the other end because there'd be no one there, and they just eat snails. And then you see them show, and then you go and fish for them up there, and then they just move into that bay, and they'd eat snails. Do you know what I mean? They had rafts and rafts of weed. It's full of natural life, and they were pretty natural fish. But they definitely like a bit of bait now, from what I hear.
They've got used to it.
They got used to it, yeah. But I caught that fish, the one that I wanted, the baby black. It was, yeah.
That sounded like good angling as well, Oz? Weren't you in a swim a long way away and you saw it show, and then you just caught a fish or something?
There it is. It's on TV.
There it is. Yeah. So the story behind that is, and at the time I was getting a few bits from Damien was sending me a few bits, so I've always had associations with various tackle companies and what have you through their kindness and what have you. And I was speaking to Damien that afternoon. I'd just got back from holiday. I'd put a huge hit of bait in about a week before, and I was walking the lake. It was a hot, sultry, late May, early June. It's first week of June actually, and I'd walked the lake and I hadn't seen anything. And I remember phoning Damien up and saying, "No, haven't seen anything, but I'm gonna carry on walking until I either see one or I drop that." And he sent a message back saying something like, "Yeah, that sounds about right," sort of thing. And a few hours later, I see one show off what they called the point. So naturally, I just thought, I've seen nothing on my baited area, I'll go and fish the point. So I've gone round, got my gear round onto the point, put the rods out, and the next morning, mid-morning, I've had a take. Played it in, and it's one of the back commons, 20 odd pounds, like a barbel, ancient old thing. So I'd done a couple of self takes, put it back, and my mate Paul Forward was fishing Burghfield at the time, and he's come walking. He's drove around and come walking into this particular lake, and said, "Do you want to go for breakfast?" I was like, "Do you know what? It's about that time. Yeah, come on, I'll reel in and we'll go." So off we went, had a bit of breakfast, came back to the swim. I think Paul went back to his lake, and I've gone back to my swim, and I'm sat there. It's hot, windy, and I'm looking out at the lake, and my mates that did the photographs of the Burghfield Common, they'd like rung me and they said, "Oh, can we come down for a bit of a social for you two?" I said, like, yeah, I'm on the point. So I dared you down. Anyway, I'm sitting there, I'm getting the tea gear ready and all that, because they like to be made a fuss of, sort of thing. And I'm staring out at the lake, and it's that, you know when you get that beautiful glistening surface where everything's rippling, the evening sun's just shimmering, and it's like everything's like a sheet of glass but moving. It's like that. And then this thing has just erupted about 250 odd yard down the lake, out, pretty much triangulated easily over my baited area, and it's just launched out. I can only describe it as like a fresher shark. It's just
You knew which one it was?
It's just black, long, and there was another fish that it could have been, but I was like, I'd have taken either of them at the time. Do you know what I mean? But I was pretty convinced that it was that one, because I'd heard that it showed similar to that when it was like on it type of thing, and I knew that there was a chance. I think the second chap that caught it, I think it jumped out like that when he caught it, and he moved on it and caught it. I was like, that's the signs are good. So just as my mates are coming down the track, I'm pulling the brolly pegs up. They're like, "What are you doing? You've caught one." So I'm moving and going. So they left me to it, as it goes. And I chucked everything in the barrow, gone back to the van, drove round to the other side, got a new car park. And logistically it's an awkward situation, but I ended up parking in a different lake, barrowing over, getting in my swim, and funnily enough, like the police helicopter was hovering over us that night. It was over Burghfield, us, kept coming down, putting that old infrared thing,
looking for you,
thinking, what's going on? Paul's phoning out, what's going on? Someone escaped from somewhere. Apparently someone had been seen with a gun in the area or something. But it's just one of them nights that crackled with some sort of atmosphere, and you didn't quite know what to make of it to begin with, but it was like something was in the air. Big old grey clouds just rolled in and sat low, like when they feel like oppressive, everything has gone flat calm, and it's due to blow up quite a big wind in the night and rain and what have you. I was thinking, bloody hell, this is like something special. It just felt right. Everything felt right, and you can't. It doesn't matter whether you talk watercraft experience, whatever. You can't explain those things.
No.
They just are what they are, and this was one of them nights, and it was one of them times. So I've gone to bed. It's sticky, humid, hot. The wind didn't really appear, but the rain did, and I didn't get to bed till gone 2, and I was up. It was early June, so it was like I was up at 4, 10 past 4, something like that, and so I'd been at work on nights. I'd done a night on the point. I'd moved, sorted my rods out. I was tired now, and I woke up, and you know when your eyes are actually, it feel like pins have been, they're just prickly and hot, and I was like, and I've propped myself up on my bed. I was like, make a coffee, Ozzy, and it's flat calm, and I remember just looking out of the lake and just seeing one go over my spot, big set of rings go emanating out, and it's flat calm, drizzle, slightly heavier rain intermittently coming down on the brolly. Really felt like you could get a bite at any moment. They were still there, and I made my coffee, and I'm propped up on the bed like this. And you know when you keep sort of like that, you're so tired, you want to fall back asleep, but you're terrified you're going to miss something. And I thought, this is my last morning. I could just lay in, and it doesn't matter if I see him up the other end. I've got to go home. But that thing inside you is like, you've got to be up. You've got to be looking. And I kept like that. And the next thing, I've beep, doop, doop, and the old rod's going over like that. The line's picking up, and like I'm in. And it was so hot. I was just in my boxer shorts and T-shirt. I've legged it down this muddy old slope, pulled into this fish, and that was electric. Flat calm, just the pitter-patter of rain on the surface. And it was like one of them comic book things where it's quite a shallow lake, isn't it? But this take and this eruption in the lake was like someone had pulled a plug out of a concrete bath, and you just get that big vortex, and that as the water sucks down. And it was like that. And I've just looked out like wide-eyed, and my line's sort of slicing out, and then there's this fish on the surface powering right. Big fish. And again, it's just got, that fish has got a lot of power. It's an immensely powerful carp. And again, very similar to the Burghfield Common, weird set of circumstances. It's just like 180'd on a sixpence, and decided to charge straight back to the weediest section of the lake that was like floor to ceiling with that eelgrass and Canadian and what have you. And he just buried himself in it. Boom. And it was stalemate for a fair while. I kept constant pressure on it. I was thinking, come on. And the only problem with him going left was there was a big barrel in a bay out to my left. There's a sailing club, and they use it as like a sort of thing to go around. And I thought, that's got to be mindful of that sort of thing. What I really wanted in the end, I wanted this fish to come out of the weed with a big cloak of weed over his head, just pump him straight into the net and go, thank you very much. That's what I wanted in that scenario. But the reality of it is, it never really works like that. It does with £20
It doesn't
cottons.
with you, does it? Every iconic carp you've caught.
Yeah. Apart from it's
made you fight for it.
You have to sometimes, and that is part of the fun, I suppose. But yeah, this thing like it's come down the left hand side, and there's this blue barrel, and obviously I've spoken to Tom recently. I won't steal his thunder, but it's a different scenario, but a similar situation. And my eyes are fixated on this barrel, and I'm just winching and cranking as this fish is kiting and coming into my inside bank on the left hand side, and I'm thinking, I ain't going to get that past that barrel. And as the line sliced closer and closer, I'm cranking quicker and quicker and quicker, just pumping as much line onto the reel as I possibly can. And all I can feel in my mind's eye is I can just envisage this barrel just starting to go boom, boom. And I'm thinking, no, don't you go round there. And I've got more and more line on the reel, and I've seen the line slice, barrel didn't move. I was like, gee, the relief washed over me like you wouldn't believe.
I bet.
And then I've just got this beautiful big tree-lined bay, flat calm to play this
now you
fishing.
can enjoy it a little bit.
I can enjoy it. And I still didn't know I'd hooked really, but I played it in this beautiful bay. Again, I was the only one on the lake. And out of the depths, this head like a big black Labrador just rose up and hit the surface. And I was like, my eyes just widened up. I sunk the net. I was like, I know who you are. And I got the net under him. And
Toby, have you got a picture of the other side of the baby black?
I can have a look.
I like the other side of it actually.
Yeah,
it's a bit more like the Black Mirror. You know, it's But
one picture.
So that's job done for the book as well.
That,
then, Oz.
so
you've got a bit of writing to do.
Yeah, I've got some writing to do. You know, first things first. Obviously, I had to get a publisher, and I had to, you know, I hadn't done any of the finite details. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, to be honest. I just thought, I can write a book, you know. I've got it in my head. It's all in my head. You know, I knew what I wanted. And then I thought, well, the logistics of this are a bit different. So I started making inquiries and what have you. And I ended up managing to set up a bit of a meeting at one of the shows with Empress. I was nervous, I'll be honest with you.
What, like an interview, is it? Or?
It felt like I was just like, yeah, you can go and see Cliff at Empress. He's on the Empress, and I was thinking, Jesus, you know, he's like, you know, to me, he was like the godfather of the book scene in the modern era type of thing. You know, I was thinking, I need this. He prints Terry's books. He's done Nigel's, but he's done. You know, so many good books, and I'd looked through all of these amazing and I thought, this would be good. So I was nervous, and they're so lovely, that the Moulders. But I was nervous. I went to see Cliff, and I thought, what if he turns around and says, "You got to be joking, boy. Off you go," sort of thing. But I sort of tried to sell it to him as best I could, and I'd spoken to Paul briefly, and I think they'd had a few chats with, you know, Mickey Gray and various other people, and I got offered the deal sort of thing. I was like, Jesus, it's starting to become reality now. And you know, I remember old Cliff saying, "You got some work to do now, son." You know, and little did I know just quite how much. Yeah, that is.
It's a lovely book, that, Oz.
Yeah, thank you
very much. Force of Nature, we got it over there, actually.
Yeah, and I'm really... It's one of the proudest things that I've done, again, outside of my work life. Well, this is now my work life, but I wrote the book while I was still sort of in the fire service and just sort of coming out of it, really. And, I like, you know, when I used to spend those nights, I didn't even know how to use a computer properly. Like when Paul Moulder said to me, "Right, we've got to set up Dropbox." I'm like, "What the hell's Dropbox?" I didn't know it.
What is Dropbox, Tony?
I didn't know how to. I didn't even know how to drag and drop from one screen into another.
Things, mate.
He had to show me. Like he's like, "Right, I'll talk you through it." I bet he was thinking, "Flipping heck, I wish we hadn't bothered with this bloke." But we got there. I mean, you know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we'd still be working on, you know, as it came nearer and nearer, the layout and all the graphics and various other stuff. There's so much to it. It is unbelievable. If you've never dipped your toe into that market before, it's a hell of a responsibility, because you've done it for yourself, but you've also got now a responsibility to the publishing company and to the proofwriters and readers and the guys that have done your guest chapters. Gaz did me my maps, drew the maps.
Yeah, they're recognisable, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're great, aren't they?
Bless him, he's so good at all that stuff.
Book writing in photography. I mean, carp anglers wouldn't necessarily have, the people that actually go carp fishing nowadays wouldn't necessarily have ever tried to get into that type of stuff, and it's bred a lot of writers and a lot of photographers as a result, hasn't it? Good photographers and
definitely,
and people that would
talented.
Never have dreamed of writing a book. It's still a great opportunity for people, isn't it? To
write about something that that's giving you a lot back, something that you're passionate about. Whatever you're into. I mean, if you're into motor racing or whatever, or bikes or mountaineering or whatever it is, to actually get the chance, they're big wide fields with a lot of people involved. So to get the chance to write about something that you really love and tell your story in your way, with the complete love of the publisher, they just give you complete control and freedom, which is incredible. Really, it's a lot of trust there.
Is that normal for a publisher?
I don't know. I dealt with Empress. I spoke to Cliff Mulder. I worked with Paul Mulder, and Tony Mulder did the printing. So the two brothers and the dad, it's a family thing. They treated me like I was part of the family. Incredible. They are so genuine and so passionate about what they do. It made the job for me so easy, in the respect of, not easy, but it made it more pleasurable. They helped. They take a lot of the sting out of it, although it is, it's a big risk to do it. I hadn't done a huge amount of. I might
have 3,000 books in my back room for like 10
exactly.
years.
The it's down to you really. Once it's done, it's I was quite fortunate that there was a decent amount of people out there that were really interested in my sort of angling. The launch went really well, and it took a lot of the pressure off me straight away for sales, and now that it just allowed them to be able to trickle out. But I did a lot of post writing sort of I did a lot of slideshows. I was going out my way to make sure that I'd try and get to various bits of the country to meet other anglers, because just because you come from the southeast doesn't mean to say that matey boy from up there has got any interest in you at all. But if you go out there and chat to them, they're like, he's quite an interesting guy, I'll buy that book. And I've met some great guys from up the north of the country that you'd never, apart from the Northern Angling Show, never have been up there. So to know that book's gone to Canada, it's gone to New Zealand, it's gone to Thailand. Incredible. It's such a buzz to know that there's people out there that have read your story and take some maybe form of inspiration. I wrote it to try and inspire.
I'm sure it will do
people to do the sort of thing, and for them to really to go, do you know what? If that fella can do it and achieve that whilst working a fairly normal job with a fairly normal life, I can go and do what I want to do, and I can achieve it. It means that I wanted it to say to people, look, if you want it, you can go out and get it and do it. It just takes a bit of effort and a little bit of sacrifice at times. But, do what you want to do and set your goals to your limitations, if you like. And if you feel like there's no limits, go out and do whatever it is that you want to do.
But do it with a passion.
And do it with passion. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Before we finish up, Oz, so Sticky Baits and Thinking Anglers, you're doing a lot of work with them at the moment. That's your full-time job now?
It was, part-time, full-time, however you want to look at it. I was really, really fortunate to get that opportunity from coming out of the fire. I can't remember how many years I did in the fire service, but I was looking for a change in direction of career. A lot of injuries. I was starting to think, could I do something else? If I don't do it now, I'm going to run out of time. I was given a bit of a sort of helping hand once I'd left the service. My good mate Jeff, he sort of took me in and gave me some work. I worked for him for a year, but it was more sort of inside work, and it was never really, you know, I always thankful for what he did, because he gave me a sort of stepping stone. But I'm an outdoor person, and I knew it was never going to be long term for me. So I sort of left there after a year, and I didn't really know exactly what direction I was going to take. I had various ideas, but was unsure. And I'd been speaking to Ben at Thinking for a number of years, used their kit just as I used stuff from Korda and ESP and what have you. I've got good relations with all these guys, which has always been, you know, I'm very grateful for that. But I'd been speaking to Ben for a while, and he was like, "What is that? You know, what actually are you going to do?" I was like, "I don't really know. I've got ideas, but I've got nothing concrete." And he went, "Well, you know," he said, "how long are you prepared to wait?" I said, "I've got a bit of money saved up." I said, "I'm not going to rush into this. This is a life choice for me. I need to get the right thing." And so I'd been out of work for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. And Ben said to me, "Look, we're going to be like sort of rebranding Thinking in the autumn." Tom at Sticky is like sort of come in as a bit of an investor, and we're going to have a little look at revamping everything, and you know, maybe you could be part of that. It's like a brand new start type of thing. I was like, Jesus, what? This is a good opportunity. I didn't really need to think about it, but I needed to work out where my position could be and what I could do. So the summer sort of ticked by, and it got towards the autumn, and I thought, bloody hell, I need to chat with these guys. So I set up a meeting, and yeah, pretty much I was like, you know, you can be part of this, the new resurgence of this brand from the very beginning, and you can do the sort of things that you're really interested in, which is being out on the bank, meeting anglers, doing the filming, or being part of the filming. I really wanted to try sitting in front of the camera. I'd never done it before, what have you, you know. But that's all part and parcel of these modern companies, isn't it? Everyone, you know, look at you.
You can't make it in this industry now, can you?
No. I knew I'd done my book. I'd written in magazines, but I knew film was going to be the forthcoming choice of media, and the way that things were put forward. And I thought, bloody hell,
you all look like a good fit, don't you? The company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, Tom had said to me, "Would you like to come on board at Sticky? If you're going to be part of it, you might as well be part of the whole thing." Which obviously I had to go and speak to Jeff and say to him, "Look, you know, I've used your bait for a long, long time. It was difficult for me, but you know, that's business sometimes, and I had to look at my future." So I drove up to Hull and looked at Tom's premises, which was phenomenal. You know, so professional, incredible set of ingredients, great baits. Thought, if I'm going to move bait firm after all these years, it's got to be to something that I'm really, you know, impressed by. And my God, yeah, it's incredible level of professionalism up there. And Tom had that real fire, you know, that real sort of, you know, desire to push things forward. And I thought, you know, this is an opportunity that I can't really miss. So between the two of them, Ben and Tom, I got given a golden opportunity to be part of a company that I loved and had been part of for a few years, which was Thinking, and a new company that was so progressive in the bait scene, and would allow me to be able to become part of the sort of filming structure.
How much filming is there?
Well, I went back in September, signed my contract and what have you, and within 2 weeks, I was sat in front of the cameras on Christchurch.
I watched that.
I was like, Jesus Christ, that's a baptism of fire. They don't mess about, these boys. Straight in there on on a venue that I don't think had even ever been filmed by a company in that
well-known
situation.
venue, but like you say, not necessarily seen too
because
much.
It's such a risk. To spend 3 or 4 days with a group of anglers, a busy venue, and a film crew. It could go terribly wrong, and you've wasted a lot of money.
But they're popular films, aren't they? I see the numbers that you're getting, and you in particular. There's a lot of demand. People want to listen to what you've got to say. Yeah,
I mean, both. We just started. Obviously, I was lucky enough to be part of those early reflections films for Sticky, and then we've just done the first run of films for Thinking, and they were
raw
incredibly well received. So I'm doing small raw in session camcorder, handheld camcorder type stuff, which I think people find quite cathartic because it gives them an essence of their own angling and
reality a little bit.
Do you know what I mean? You can drop your catapult in the margin. It's like it's not all polished. It's like rootsy, earthy, sort of, in your face carp angling.
We've all got our different styles now, haven't we?
Exactly. And I think people love to see, they love to see, how Darryl goes about his fishing. They love to see how Miles Gibson goes about his fishing. They love to see how Oz goes about his fishing, or whatever, because, you're only anglers at the end of the day, but you've all got different styles, and I think that comes across in our ethos as a firm. We've got a diverse range of anglers that are now, reaching a lot of the market at different stages of the market, because carp fishing's changed. It's an open forum now. There's people that are happy going down their local farm pit, catching doubles all day on a Sunday afternoon, and there's guys that are going out fishing for 10 carp in 150 acres.
Yeah, the sport's so big. We've got to cater for everyone. Doing these sort of things as well, you've got to think, right, the audience is so diverse. So
I was so nervous in the respect of, if I come across as just wanting to be a big carp angler or fish for certain fish, that people are like, you've taken an elitist route or whatever, because there's so many people that are doing it for their own special particular reasons. I'll do it for my particular reason, but I love the fact that everyone's got their own little place and their own thing that they do. And if they do it for the love of carp fishing and the love of catching fish, and they respect the environment and just love the sport, then you've got companies that will provide you with all the resources to do that with, and all you've got to do is go out there and enjoy yourself.
Just go out there and enjoy it. Oz, good podcast. It's good to listen to your stories and meet you, and I knew I'd be interested in what you've got to say, and thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.